Book 3, Mahā Vagga. Sutta number 3.1, Pabbajjā Sutta, on going forth. I will speak here in praise of going forth, as per the example of the one with the eye of wisdom, and the method of investigation he applied, which led to his decision in going forth. Living a householder's life is very constricting, full of troubles and meaningless disturbances all around. One is always surrounded by circumstances that contaminate, and with the constant possibility for more. However, to go forth means living life in the freedom of wide open space. After reflecting in this manner, he made the decision and just went forth. Once gone forth, he abstained from doing any evil actions, and by abandoning the use of evil speech, he left behind misconduct in words, as he purified himself. The Buddha thus came to the mountains of the Magadhan people in Rajagha. There he went out to collect his alms food, bestowed with his excellent noble marks for people to see. While standing on the veranda in the topmost level of his palace, King Bimbisara saw him. Observing the excellent noble marks on him, the king commented to his advisers, "Look over there, good sirs. Pay attention to this one. Observe how he is handsome and pure in his disposition. You can clearly see he is so different in his demeanor. Indeed, he is most certainly endowed with good behavior. See how he does not even gaze up, being fixed and looking ahead, a yoke's length in front of him. His eyes are deliberately lowered, so mindful in his every gesture. This one is most definitely not from a low-class upbringing. Send out the royal scout messengers to carefully watch and report back to us where this bhikkhu is going to next." With the royal messengers dispatched, they followed close behind, observing attentively to find out as to where he was going next, eager to learn where he was dwelling. Being fully restrained in his behavior, and with his sense doors closely guarded, he continued on his alms round quietly and without any interruption in between. And when his bowl was quickly filled with food, his heart kept its tranquillity, remaining fully alert and mindful. Once having collected his alms food, the sage left the village and proceeded towards the Pandava cliffs. Once there, he reflected, "This is the place where I will be staying." Meanwhile, the scouts were following closely, and on seeing him settle at his new dwelling, they retreated to a safe distance and remained there, while one of them went back to the palace and informed the king, "O great king, the bhikkhu whom you singled out is residing on the eastern side of the Pandava cliffs. He is now seated there, unmoved, just like a tiger or a bull. He sits there among the cliffs, as if he was a lion in front of his mountain cave." On hearing the words of his messenger, the warrior king quickly set out on his royal chariot in the direction of the Pandava cliffs. Having gone as far as the terrain would allow for the chariots to go, the king and his men dismounted and proceeded on foot the rest of the way, until finally they reached him, and there the king sat down. Once seated, the king then exchanged friendly greetings with him, after which he continued by saying, "You are so young and youthful, still in the first stage, in the prime of your life. You are uniquely regal in your demeanor and handsome. Surely you must be of the finest of royal Khattiya lineages. You must look splendid, spearheading an entire royal army, encircled by troops of elephants. I am ready to offer you my treasure houses with limitless pleasures, all for your personal enjoyment. Just tell me of your birth lineage." "O king, to the north of here, there is a kingdom that stretches into the Himalayas. There lies the prosperous territory of the Kosalan people, where limitless treasures and resources are also to be found. There one will find the lineage of the sun, the Khattiyas of the Sakyan clan. It is from that family lineage that I went forth as I became homeless, leaving behind me all sensual pleasures. By recognizing the many dangers in the pursuit of sensual pleasures, in contrast, I found safety in the giving up of such pleasures. Now, I continue training in my striving, for that is where I find tranquility and appeasement for the heart." Sutta Nipāta 3.2 Padhāna Sutta on Striving. While in meditation near the Neranjara river, I was driven to practice by striving with determination and utmost resolution, simply to reach the safety of no longer being bound up and imprisoned. Then Namuchi, Māgha, approached me and began speaking kind words to me, feigning compassion. "You are so weak and emaciated, with barely any color left on your skin. Surely you're on the brink of death. It takes 1,000 stages to reach death, and already you are at the very last stage. I find you being much closer to death than to life. But to live is much better than to die. So live, my dear sir, for that way you could still gain merits. As long as you can maintain the sacred fire, you would be living the holy life, and thus accumulating many merits. So why even bother with so much striving? To strive in such a resolute manner is truly a difficult path, so very hard to overcome the challenges and thus attain what you seek." These were the verses spoken by Māgha, who stood there waiting right next to the Buddha. When this was said, the Blessed One addressed Māgha by saying, "O evil one, you who are the kinsman of all those who are heedless, you have crept here with your cunning ways, trying to deceive. I haven't the slightest need for any merits. But those who continue to look upon the holy life as no more than the accumulation of merits, let Māgha go and speak to them instead. There is much effort, with such strong faith, in the life I am living, along with wisdom found in me, to be striving resolutely like this. So why even bring up a question about wanting to live? If the wind that blows could dry up even the powerful rivers, then why should my blood also not get dried up in the face of my resolute striving? And when the blood dries up, the bile and phlegm contained within also dry up. As the flesh begins fading away, too, the heart, however, becomes pure and bright. Not to mention the mindfulness, which now has developed to an exceedingly refined level, along with wisdom and collectedness of heart that are always present and firmly established. Meditating like this, I have reached the highest form of feeling. As a result, the heart no longer has in it any interest or longing for sensual pleasures. Now, behold the purity of such a being. Desire for sensuality is your first army, while hatred is your second, followed by your third army, which is hunger and thirst, whereas craving makes up your fourth army. Drowsiness and procrastination make up your fifth army, and fear happens to be your sixth, followed by your seventh army, which is skeptical doubt, whereas belittling others and pig-headedness are none other than your eighth army. Profiting and gaining fame or obtaining honor and renown through wrong means and falsehood, while praising oneself and disparaging others, all these are your armies too, Namuchi, for they're always at your service, Kanha, their dark lord. But whoever is not a true warrior cannot defeat or conquer them. Yet it is only by vanquishing them all that true happiness could be attained. So I will push through my austerities and continue wearing the munja grass, and if necessary, let even death come. For I'd rather die in battle than allow myself to be defeated against your armies. I will not give up, like some other recluses and Brahmins who get gobbled up without ever being seen or heard of again, for they do not know nor understand the path that is taken by those truly living the holy life. Witnessing Mara approach at the head of his vast army, mounted on his elephant, charging at me in full force, as I too march forward unflinchingly to meet them all in battle, for there can never be any retreat for me. There is no deterring or budging me from my position. Even though the world, with its armies of devas and humans, does not have a chance of going against you, let alone vanquishing you, yet standing here, I will break your entire armies with wisdom, much like an unfired clay pot is smashed into bits with a rock. With mindfulness well established, I masterfully take control of my thoughts. I will wander from region to region, training a great number of disciples everywhere. And those disciples also will work diligently and with unshakable resolve, as they keep my teachings in their hearts, following them and remaining undeterred despite your best efforts, as they, too, having gone beyond, will grieve no more. For 7 years, step by step, I followed closely behind the Blessed One. Yet, no opportunities did I obtain to see some weakness or vulnerability in him, the ever-mindful Buddha. Just like a predatory bird that circles in the sky, looking for its prey, then spots a golden-hued stone, and imagining it to be a piece of tender, fatty meat, suddenly sweeps down to attack. It comes seeking gratification, desiring to grab itself a quick, sweet, and easy meal. But, not finding that satisfaction of a sweet and easy meal, the bird fled from there. And now, just like that crow that came attacking the stone, but only ended up leaving despondently, I too find myself leaving Gautama alone, utterly dejected. And right at that moment, the string instrument fell from the waist belt of that grief-stricken being, that yakka who fled and vanished from the scene, completely upset and displeased. Sutta Nipāta 3.3 Subhāsita Sutta. Well-spoken words. I have personally heard this. Once, the Blessed One was living in the monastery offered by the lay disciple Anathapindika at Jeta's Park in Savatthi. It was then that the Blessed One addressed the bhikkhus by saying, Bhikkhus. Yes, Bhante, replied the bhikkhus. Bhikkhus, when the words you use possess within them 4 factors, they are then considered to be well-spoken indeed, faultless, well-uttered, and therefore not to be criticized by the wise, as they would be blameless. What are these 4? Here, the bhikkhu speaks only well-spoken and appropriate words, and not what is unsuitable or poorly chosen for the occasion. He speaks virtuous words, and not those that lack any virtue. The bhikkhu uses speech that is lovely, strewn with amiable words, and not the kind that is intended to harm, and with ugly words. He speaks words that are truth, and not lies. Therefore, bhikkhus, when the words you use possess within them these 4 factors, they are then considered to be well-spoken indeed, faultless, well-uttered words, and therefore not to be criticized by the wise, as they would be blameless. This is what the Blessed One said. Then the Blessed One uttered the following verses. The noble ones declare words that are well spoken to be the most excellent, whereas avoiding non-virtuous words and only speaking those that are strewn with virtue, they consider it as its second quality. Speaking lovely and amiable words happen to be the third, and not speaking any lies, but only what is true, is its 4th quality. Then the Venerable Vangisa arose from his seat, and by arranging his upper robe over one shoulder, and bringing his hands together in front of his heart, directing them towards the Blessed One, he said the following words. O Holy One, I find myself inspired. I feel it necessary for me to speak a few words, Bhante, if I may. The Blessed One replied by saying, Speak then, Vangisa, whatever it is you feel inspired by. Then the Venerable Vangisa spoke in verse, while sharing his heartfelt words in praise of the Blessed One and in his presence. Only speak in a way that will not cause harm to either oneself or another, for such indeed is the nature of the well-spoken word. Only speak lovely and amiable words, because of which there occurs joy in the hearts of listeners, both during speech and even much later. Therefore, speak words that do not cause evil to trail behind them. Truth is the deathless word, and this itself is the eternal law. The noble ones, being established in truth themselves, declare it to be the very essence of the holy life. The words uttered by the Buddha lead one to true safety, for they are spoken for his attainment of freedom and the realization of Nibbana itself. They indeed take one to the end of suffering. Truly, this is the best kind of speech. Sutta Nipāta 3.4 Sundarikabhāradvāja Sutta. The Brahmin, Sundarikabhāradvāja. This is what I personally heard. Once, when the Blessed One was staying near the bank of the river Sundarika, The Brahmin Sundarikabhāradvāja was busy engaged in his ritual of Agihutta as he kept the sacrificial fire going by the bank of the Sundarika river. Having lit up the fire, the Brahmin then got up from it as he looked around in the four directions, wondering to whom he should offer the leftovers of the sacrificial cake. Then the Brahmin Sundarikabhāradvāja saw the Blessed One not far from him, seated under a tree, having covered his head with his robe to protect it from the sun. And by taking the sacrificial cake in his left hand and the sacrificial water spout in his right hand, he went and approached the Blessed One. The Blessed One, upon hearing the footsteps of the Brahmin approaching, began uncovering his head. On seeing this, the Brahmin suddenly realized, "Oh, this recluse is one of those shaven heads. He is one of the shaven heads," and began thinking how it might be better to just turn back. But soon enough he started reflecting how there are Brahmins who also shave their heads, and he considered, "Why should I not approach and first ask this good sir about his lineage and birth?" So the Brahmin continued walking as he approached the Blessed One and asked, "Good sir, what caste were you born in? What is your lineage?" Then the Blessed One replied to the Brahmin Sundarikabhāradvāja in verse by saying, "I am no Brahmin, nor the son of kings. Neither am I a merchant belonging to the household life. But having come to know and fully understand the ways of ordinary people and their ignorance, I now continue living this life with nothing, roaming the world with wisdom in my heart. Donning the 3 robes and with the head shaved, I wander without a place to call my home, as I live this life, having become cool and quenched. Therefore, as I am not one looking for a certain type of people to call my own or spend my time with, you asking the question as to which caste I was born into or to which lineage I belong is in itself quite inappropriate and unfitting Brahmin. But it is customary for Brahmins, friend, when meeting other people, to ask if they too are Brahmins or not," replied the Brahmin. And the Blessed One said, "If you claim to be a true Brahmin while stating that I am not, then I shall question you on the ancient Saviti, the Gayatri mantra, in its 3 lines and 24 syllables. Born as human beings, whether to warrior kingly families or Brahmins, what is it that seers or sages rely upon or hope for as they make their sacrifices and give offerings to the gods, as they go seeking a certain outcome while being in the world? For the one who has reached the end itself and attained to the highest knowing, if he were to receive such an offering, then surely that would be of much blessing to the one who is giving." The Brahmin then said, "Then for sure our offering here would indeed become fruitful, for we see in you someone who has the highest knowledge. For not having seen anyone like you before, we do not offer this sacrificial cake to anyone else except to you. In that case, Brahmin, you are now in the most suitable condition to approach, and perhaps you may truly find here the one who is indeed cooled and quenched, passionless, unperturbed, the wise one who has truly reached the end. Good Gautama, my heart very much wishes to bestow an offering by making you a sacrifice. Please instruct me on the proper manner in conducting it, so that I may gain the best results from this action. "In that case, Brahmin, listen carefully, and I will instruct you," said the Blessed One. "Do not go asking others about their birth or lineage to find out as to who they are. Instead, look at their very behavior, the way they conduct themselves. That will tell you much more. Remember, fire comes out of firewood. After all, unshakable sages are to be found even within the lowest rungs of society, true thoroughbreds who are born through restraint, the results of having constant wise moral shame. Using truth to tame and discipline themselves, one becomes supported by one's own self-restraint. Thus, the one possessing the highest knowledge lives while having completed the goal of the holy life. It is to such a superior being that all those Brahmins seeking to gain blessings must go, making their offerings at the appropriate time, at the feet of such noble ones. In this manner, the sacrifices they make become truly fruitful. Those who give up sensual pleasures and go through life homeless, with their thoroughly restrained behavior and unblemished character, living their lives as straight as the shuttle. It is to such superior beings that all those Brahmins seeking to gain blessings must go, making their offerings at the appropriate time at the feet of such noble ones. In this manner, the sacrifices they make become truly fruitful. Those who, by guarding their sense doors, have freed themselves from the handcuffs of lust, just like the full moon is freed from the grip of Rahu, it is to such superior beings that all those Brahmins seeking to gain blessings must go, making their offerings at the appropriate time at the feet of such noble ones. In this manner, the sacrifices they make become truly fruitful. Traveling the world, they are always mindful, unblemished wherever they are, neither cherishing nor trying to hold on to anything they experience. It is to such superior beings that all those Brahmins seeking to gain blessings must go, making their offerings at the appropriate time at the feet of such noble ones. In this manner, the sacrifices they make become truly fruitful. The Tathagata, having given up sensual pleasures, wanders thus, spotless and victorious, wherever he goes, having directly known and realized himself the very end of birth and death. As the epitome of being utterly quenched and cooled, he is like a deep, cool pond. It is the Tathagata, the ideal receiver of the sacrificial cake. With equals he is equal, yet remains far removed from those who are unequal to him. The Tathagata is of incomparable wisdom, unblemished, whether in this or any other world. Indeed, it is the Tathagata, the ideal receiver of the sacrificial cake, in whom there cannot be found any evil or cunningness, who dwells without delusion, conceit, or possessiveness. Such a true Brahmin is desireless, for he has pulled out greed and anger from their roots, and thus become extinguished, and having abandoned the stain of grief from his heart, indeed, it is the Tathagata, the ideal receiver of the sacrificial cake. With all the mind's fixations relinquished, he has nothing to take up nor call his own, whether in this world or anywhere beyond. Indeed, it is the Tathagata, the ideal receiver of the sacrificial cake. With a collected heart, he has crossed the floods, and having fully understood the depth of the Dhamma by means of his supreme vision, he has destroyed the defilements of the heart, and as such, he bears his very last body. Indeed, it is the Tathagata, the ideal receiver of the sacrificial cake. The heart's contaminant of wanting to re-become bhavasava, as well as to use destructive and mean speech, are abandoned and finally finished in him. By possessing perfect knowledge, he is now liberated in every way. Therefore, indeed, it is the Tathagata, the ideal receiver of the sacrificial cake. Having unshackled himself from all bonds, he lives with no attachments whatsoever, while among those who are attached to conceit, he stands free and untouched by any chains that bind. And having fully understood the nature of suffering itself in all its aspects, with its sphere of function and foundation, indeed, it is the Tathagata, the ideal receiver of the sacrificial cake. No more supported by any hopes or expectations, experiencing only the reality of seclusion, he has gone far beyond the confines of any views, doctrines, or ideas adhered to and followed by others. And with no more objects to identify with or lean on, he rests in serene tranquility. Indeed, it is the Tathagata, the ideal receiver of the sacrificial cake. Whether above or below, whatever phenomena there might be, there now remains nothing, for he is over and done with all things, having fumigated and cleared them all through his penetrative understanding. In this way, he remains at peace, having ended that primal drive to want to grab, and thereby gained freedom. Indeed, it is the Tathagata, the ideal receiver of the sacrificial cake. Seeing the end of the fetter of birth, with lust having been thoroughly uprooted and left without any remainder, he is the one called pure, undefiled, stainless, and flawless. Indeed, it is the Tathagata, the ideal receiver of the sacrificial cake. Not seeing any signs of a substantial or independent self anywhere, his mind has come to a unified coherence, thoroughly collected and stilled. With no more movements taking place, he continues undeterred, the embodiment of kindness, having let go of all doubts and uncertainties. Indeed, it is the Tathagata, the ideal receiver of the sacrificial cake. With no delusion left, with true understanding and penetrative insight, he sees through all things with the highest clarity, while carrying along his final body. Having reached full awakening, he now enjoys the supreme bliss of ultimate safety. This, after all, defines the real meaning of purity for all beings. Indeed, it is the Tathagata, the ideal receiver of the sacrificial cake. Then the Brahmin, Sundarikabhāradvāja, exclaimed, "For certain, I now see how my offering is to become a true offering indeed. I find myself to be fortunate beyond measure, for I have come across a genuine teacher with such vast knowledge. Let Mahā himself be my witness as I make this offering of the sacrificial cake to you. Kindly accept and enjoy it, O Blessed One." It is inappropriate for me, Brahmin, to eat food that has been chanted over with mantras and spells. After all, This itself is not the teaching of the noble ones, who have the eyes to see. Thus, food gained by reciting verses or spells is not suitable for Buddhas to consume. And so long as this principle remains across endless time, the awakened ones will adhere to it and live by it. But instead, you may offer the Tathagata other kinds of food or drinks, which we could consume. That way, you will truly benefit by having made your offering to someone who has destroyed the heart's contaminants and overcome all doubts. For it is such a rare person indeed, the true field of merits, who is to be sought after by those wanting to make offerings. It is such a gain, such a wonderful opportunity for me to have come to see and meet the Blessed One, while at the same time learning from him as to whom gifts of offering should be appropriately made. Thus, I came and gained immensely from your advice. With the mind now free from disturbances, one remains free of anger and impulsivity. Thus, by getting liberated from the drive to pursue sensual pleasures, one does not allow the mind to drift here and there, and instead is fully aware of what exactly it is engaged in all the time. Having removed existing boundaries and gone beyond all mental limitations, one tames oneself and thus comes to finally understand the process of rebirth and death. Such a sage who is well accomplished in his virtuous character truly is worthy of honor and of the best offerings to be placed at his feet. By training in the instructions given, and thus having removed the conceit in one's heart, one comes to offer homage with clasped hands at their heart, bowing in veneration, offering wholeheartedly whatever one can with food and drinks. It is in this way that your gifts become fruitfully rewarding. Truly, the Buddha, in whose presence I now stand, is the sublime and ideal receiver of the sacrificial cake, for you are the incomparable field of merit, since whatever offerings are brought to your presence become fruitfully rewarded, granting the giver many merits indeed. Then the Brahmin Sundarikabhāradvāja added by saying this to the Blessed One: It is excellent, Master Gautama. It is marvelous, O Blessed One. The Blessed Lord has clarified the Dhamma for me in many ways, as though he were to turn upright what had been turned upside down, revealing what was hidden, showing the way to one who was lost, holding up a lamp in the dark for those with eyesight to see. Bhante, I go to the Blessed One for refuge, and to the Dhamma, and to the Sangha of bhikkhus. Bhante, may I receive the going forth, and be granted the higher ordination in the presence of the Blessed One. Thus, the Brahmin Sundarikabhāradvāja received his full admission and the higher ordination as a bhikkhu in this dispensation from the Blessed One himself. Soon after his higher ordination, now the Venerable Sundarikabhāradvāja, while living alone and secluded from the crowd, living heedfully and with resolution, practicing diligently, before long he here and now realized for himself the noble end of the holy life, experiencing that unsurpassed knowledge for which sons of good families rightfully leave the household life by becoming homeless. And the Venerable Sundarikabhāradvāja knew with direct knowledge and certainty unparalleled, birth is finally destroyed. Now the holy life is fully lived. What should have been done is finally done, and there is no more coming to any state of becoming ever again. And the Venerable Sundarikabhāradvāja became one of the Arahants. Sutta Nipāta 3.5 Māgha Sutta. To the young Brahmin Māgha. I have personally heard this. Once, when the Blessed One was living in the Gijha peaks in Rajagha, Māgha, the young Brahmin, approached him. And after paying his respect by venerating the Blessed One, he exchanged friendly greetings, and then sat to one side and said, Master Gautama, I am a supporter, giving donations to the needy, and doing so in a generous and open-handed manner to whomever that comes asking for assistance. And from the wealth I possess, which I earn through my rightful and blameless livelihood, I give to others abundantly, be they just one person, 2 people, or 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 people, or even more. Now, Master Gautama, in being so generous, I would like to ask whether I am, in fact, obtaining and accruing any merits. The Blessed One then replied by saying, Certainly, young Brahmin, a supporter giving donations to the needy, and doing so in a generous and open-handed manner to whomever that comes asking for assistance, who earns his wealth through rightful and blameless livelihood, giving to others abundantly, be they just one person, 2 people, or 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 people, or even more. In being so generous, you would indeed be obtaining and accruing many merits. Then Māgha, the young Brahmin, addressed the Blessed One in verse by saying, Being a householder who supports the needy, giving food and drinks in an open-handed manner to whomever comes asking for assistance, as I seek to make merits, I ask the boundlessly generous Gautama, the maroon-robed homeless recluse, in what way could these sacrifices and generous acts of mine become truly pure? And the Blessed One replied, in verse, Indeed, Māgha, for when a householder seeking merits engages in supporting the needy, giving food and drinks in an open-handed manner to whomever that comes asking for his assistance, such a person would certainly attain to his heart's desire of merits gained. Thus, one's acts of generosity become pure because of the very purity of the recipients, who are indeed worthy to be receiving such gifts and offerings in the first place. Then the young Brahmin Māgha said, O Blessed One, I, being a householder who supports the needy, giving food and drinks in an open-handed manner to whomever that comes asking for assistance, as I seek to make merits, please kindly explain to me how to identify such a recipient who is truly worthy of generous gifts. Those who wander this world, completely unattached, blameless, and spotless in character, who possess nothing, living restrained and fully in control of their behavior, having accomplished the goal of the holy life, it is they, the truly worthy ones, who should be presented with the generous offerings at the appropriate time by the Brahmin seeking to gain boundless merits, breaking all those shackles and fetters that bind, living tamed and fully released, free from misery and anguish, with nothing more to desire or hope for. It is they, the truly worthy ones, who should be presented with the generous offerings at the appropriate time by the Brahmin, seeking to gain boundless merits. Those who have finally liberated themselves from all things and fetters that bind, living tamed and fully released, free from misery and anguish, with nothing more to desire or hope for, it is they, the truly worthy ones, who should be presented with the generous offerings at the appropriate time by the Brahmin seeking to gain boundless merits. Abandoning lust and anger, along with delusion, leaving them all behind and having completely destroyed the heart's contaminants, the asavas too. They are indeed the ones who have lived the holy life to the fullest. It is they, the truly worthy ones, who should be presented with the generous offerings at the appropriate time by the Brahmin, seeking to gain boundless merits. The ones whose hearts are completely void of deception or conceit, with all contaminants eradicated too. They are indeed the ones who have lived the holy life to the fullest. It is they, the truly worthy ones, who should be presented with the generous offerings at the appropriate time by the Brahmin, seeking to gain boundless merits. Those who no longer fall prey to craving, remaining considerate of others and empty of expectations, are the ones who have indeed crossed the flood and now wander selflessly. It is they, the truly worthy ones, who should be presented with the generous offerings at the appropriate time by the Brahmin, seeking to gain boundless merits. Those with hearts that have not even a single drop of craving left in them, whether for things offered by this or any other world. It is they, the truly worthy ones, who should be presented with the generous offerings at the appropriate time by the Brahmin seeking to gain boundless merits. Those who gave up entirely the search for sensual pleasures, wandering the world without having a place to call home, living purposefully as they keep to the one single course of action, just like a shuttle, without digressing. It is they, the truly worthy ones, who should be presented with the generous offerings at the appropriate time by the Brahmin seeking to gain boundless merits. Those who have freed themselves from lust, being fully in control of their sense faculties, and are just like the moon released from the grip of the eclipsing Rahu. It is they, the truly worthy ones, who should be presented with the generous offerings at the appropriate time by the Brahmin seeking to gain boundless merits. Those who have calmed their heart, liberating it from the heaviness of lust and its agitation, for whom there are no future rebirths at all, having already rid themselves of the thirst to re-become, while still living this very life. It is they, the truly worthy ones, who should be presented with the generous offerings at the appropriate time by the Brahmin seeking to gain boundless merits. Those who have abandoned birth and death altogether, without any leftover desires to re-experience things or exist further. The ones who have gone beyond all doubts. It is they, the truly worthy ones, who should be presented with the generous offerings at the appropriate time by the Brahmin seeking to gain boundless merits. Those who tread lightly upon this world, having become their own island of refuge and sources of light wherever they go, not having or possessing anything, they are released. It is they, the truly worthy ones, who should be presented with the generous offerings at the appropriate time by the Brahmin seeking to gain boundless merits. Those who here and now know and understand directly as it truly is, this is my very last birth. There are no more renewed or future existences for me anywhere. It is they, the truly worthy ones, who should be presented with the generous offerings at the appropriate time by the Brahmin seeking to gain boundless merits. Those who possess the higher knowledges are mindful throughout, as they correctly engage in the practice of the jhanas, and having attained full awakening themselves, they are now a refuge for the many. It is they, the truly worthy ones, who should be presented with the generous offerings at the appropriate time by the Brahmin seeking to gain boundless merits. So happy am I for having asked my question, for it proved itself not to have been asked in vain, but useful and helpful indeed. The Blessed One has now explained and clarified to me how to identify the truly worthy recipient of generous gifts. You indeed are the one who knows the truth about such things. You, O Lord, are the one who understands the Dhamma, clearly seeing the truth of it directly as it is. Then the young Brahmin Māgha continued by saying, O Blessed One, I, being a householder who supports the needy, giving food and drinks in an open-handed manner to whomever that comes asking for assistance, as I seek to make merits, please kindly explain to me how one could make a worthy offering appropriately and satisfactorily. And the Blessed One said, Be generous when you give, Māgha. While bestowing your gift, make sure your mind is bright and your heart joyful, remaining fully confident in the purity of your giving. It is because so much depends on the very manner in which an offering is made by the giver. This is the catalyst that could bring so many blessings to the one making the offering by removing the stains from one's heart. The one empty of lust, having already expelled hatred from his heart, cultivates in himself the feeling of metta, that is, the essence of benevolent universal loving-kindness. And whether by day or by night, he stays constantly vigilant and mindful, while pervading all directions with the boundless metta he feels in his heart. Then Māgha, the young Brahmin, asked one more question. Who is the one purified, the one released and awakened from all things that bind, Lord? How can one be able to take himself to the realm of Brahma? This I do not know, so please kindly explain it to me. For all I can say is that despite my ignorance, the Blessed One is my witness that Brahma has been seen today in person. For us, truly, there is no difference between seeing the Blessed One or Brahma. Do explain, please, O Brilliant One. How can one be born in the radiant realm of Brahma? And the Blessed One said, Whenever one makes an offering while putting into practice the three requirements in bestowing a gift, that is, before making an offering, the donor's heart is glad and happy, while in the process of giving, one's mind is bright and clear, and once having given, the heart feels joyfully contented each time the act of generosity is remembered. And if, Māgha, they would be making their offering to the ones truly worthy of generous gifts, then I declare that such a generous person is certain to be reborn in the realm of Brahma. When this was said, Māgha, the young Brahmin, exclaimed, It is excellent, O Blessed One! It is marvelous, Lord! The Blessed One has made the Dhamma clear to me in many ways. I feel as though the Blessed One has turned upright what was overturned, revealing what was hidden, showing the correct path to someone who was lost, as if bringing a lamp into the darkness for all those with eyesight to see. Bhante, I go for refuge to the Blessed One, to the Dhamma, and to the Sangha of bhikkhus. May the Blessed One accept me as one of his lay disciples who has taken refuge in him from today until the end of my life. Sutta Nipāta 3.6 Sabhiya Sutta to Sabhiya. I have personally heard this. At one time, the Blessed One was living in the squirrel's sanctuary in the bamboo park at the royal city of Rajagha. It was during that time that a certain Deva appeared in front of Sabhiya, the wandering ascetic. The Deva, who during an earlier lifetime was a former companion of Sabhiya in the holy life, posed a riddle to him by adding the following instruction. Sabhiya, you must go and lead the holy life under that teacher who happens to be the only one capable of answering this riddle. Then the wandering ascetic Sabhiya, having learned the riddle given to him by the Deva, went to recluse after recluse, Brahmin after Brahmin, meeting them in gatherings large and small, to the respective teachers presiding over these assemblies and gatherings, to his contemporary and famous founders of the prominent sects at that time, as he spoke with those who were recognized and accepted as wise, such as Purana Kassapa, Makhali Gosala, Ajita Kesakambali, Pakudha Kachayana, Sanjaya Belatiputta, and Niganta Nataputta. However, when Sabhiya, the wandering ascetic, would approach and ask them the riddle, they not only were unable to answer the question, but would openly get angry at him as they were annoyed and frustrated by his question. In addition, they would engage in arguments with him, while cross-questioning and debating with Sabhiya over the riddle, for which he genuinely sought an answer. Then it occurred to Sabhiya, these recluses and Brahmins, whether in large or small gatherings, the respective teachers presiding over these assemblies and gatherings, my contemporary and famous founders of prominent sects, such as Purana Kassapa, Makhali Gosala, Ajita Kesakambali, Pakudha Kachayana, Sanjaya Belatiputta, and Nigantanataputta, when questioned about this riddle, have not been able to give me an answer, and as a result, openly express anger towards me, and often are annoyed by my question. Not only that, but they also engage in arguments with me, while cross-questioning and debating with me over the riddle, for which I seek an answer. Then, being alone and discouraged thus, Sabhiya reflected to himself, while considering, why don't I just give up this holy life and return back to living the lowly life of pursuing sensual enjoyments? Right at that moment, the thought occurred to him, but wait, the recluse Gautama also has a large group of disciples. He too is a teacher, presiding over many assemblies and gatherings. He is well known and famed for having crossed over to the other shore. So he thought to himself, what if I went and approached the recluse Gautama and asked him about the answer to this riddle? But then it occurred to Sabhiya again how the recluses and Brahmins he had gone to are old and advanced in years. As he reflected, these elders have led the holy life for a long time. Yet, when I asked for an answer to this riddle, they were all unable to give me an answer, as well as becoming angry and annoyed with me, where they even cross-questioned me argumentatively. Now, if that is the case, then how could the recluse Gautama, who happens to be much younger than these elderly teachers, give me the answer to this riddle? After all, the recluse Gautama is young and has only recently gone forth. But then he pondered on the matter further and considered, even though many recluses may be young in age, however, recluses should neither be looked at with contempt nor their level of knowledge be undermined, for it is a fact that there are young recluses who are both powerful in their psychic abilities as well as in being wise. What if I approach the recluse Gautama and ask him for the answer to my riddle? Having made up his mind, the wandering ascetic Sabhiya set off on his journey by walking in stages in the direction of the Blessed One, knowing that at the time he was staying within the squirrel sanctuary in the royal city of Rajagha at the bamboo park. Once having reached the Blessed One, Sabhiya, the wandering ascetic, exchanged friendly greetings with the teacher and then sat to one side and said, "I have come to you with many doubts and with much trepidation, desiring to ask my questions. Please put them to rest, and may my doubts be dispelled by receiving my answers one by one according to the Dhamma." In reply, the Blessed One said, "Sabhiya, you come from afar indeed, desiring to ask your questions. I will put your doubts to rest, dispelling them all, as I answer your questions one by one according to the Dhamma. Ask now your questions, Sabhiya, however you wish, and I will put to rest each and every one of your questions, along with your doubts, one by one." Then it occurred to the wandering ascetic Sabhiya, "This is quite amazing. This is wonderful. While other recluses and Brahmins did not even give me a chance to speak or ask my questions fully, here, however, the recluse Gautama not only is giving me his consent, but is even encouraging me to ask my questions." In being thus inspired and thoroughly pleased, Sabhiya, the wandering ascetic, began asking the Blessed One, "By acquiring what can one be truly called a bhikkhu? What is self-restraint, and the meaning of being tamed? What is meant by awakening? May the Blessed One please explain these to me." The Blessed One replied by saying, "Sabhiya, when he walks on the path that leads to release, when Nibbana is known for oneself and all doubts are finally removed, giving up both becoming and non-becoming, with no more rebirth waiting for him, one lives out the very last of countless rebirths, completing the goal of the holy life. It is this person who is to be called a bhikkhu. Mindful and equanimous everywhere he goes, intending no harm to anyone in the world, never conceited, the recluse is one who has crossed over unperturbed. This is his self-restraint. Living in the world, he is supported by faculties that are developed both internally and externally, as he piercingly sees through this and the other world, having already made good use of his time. This is the meaning of being tamed. Thoroughly discerning the residues of ages past, together with their constant arisings and vanishings, pure, without any defilements or passions left in him, he arrives at the end of rebirth. This is the meaning of awakening." Then the wandering ascetic Sabhiya, rejoicing and being utterly pleased in hearing the Blessed One's response, asked a further question. "By acquiring what can one be truly called a Brahmin? Who is a recluse? And by doing what can one be washed? How can one become a Nāga? May the Blessed One please explain these to me." Then the Blessed One replied, "Sabhiya, in being cleansed of all that is unwholesome and shaken off the impure, with a thoroughly collected mind that is stainless, he looks on, having completely overcome the cycles of rebirth and no longer being stained by them. This is the meaning of being a true Brahmin. Giving up both good and bad, the calmed one no more gathers any dust. He knows this world and the other, while overcoming birth and death altogether. It is he who is called a recluse. having cleansed himself of all wrong actions, whether in thought, words, or in bodily behavior in the world. There is no more desire left in him for either celestial or human birth. In this manner, he is considered to be washed. Doing no wrong in the world, he cuts off all fetters that bind. Released, he goes freely everywhere, unattached and stainless. This is the meaning of being a true Nāga. In being given these explanations, the wandering ascetic Sabhiya rejoiced, as he was now inspired and grateful in hearing the Blessed One's response, and with joy swelling in his heart, he asked a further question. How is the field won by the victor, according to the Buddhas? In what way is one cleverly skilled? Who is the wise one? And how can the sage be recognized? May the Blessed One please explain these things to me. Then the Blessed One replied, Sabhiya, by having thoroughly considered all fields of existence, be they heavenly, human, or Brahma, while becoming disenchanted by all of them, one is released from the roots that bind a person to these realms. This is how the field is won by the victor, according to the Buddhas. Having thoroughly considered all the treasure houses, whether found in the heavenly, human, or Brahma realms, while becoming disenchanted by all of them, one is released from the roots that bind a person to these treasure houses. This is the way in which one can become cleverly skilled. Having fully examined the mind's purity, as well as the purity found in the external world, he becomes disenchanted by what they offer, looking upon them with wisdom that is truly pure, as he overcomes both the dark and the white, while transcending both. It is by possessing this discernment that one is called wise. Whether internally or externally, clearly distinguishing the genuine Dhamma from that which is Adhamma, he is one who is worthy of the veneration and love of both devas and humans alike. Having transcended both the shackles and the trap, he is the one recognized as the sage. In hearing this reply, the wandering ascetic Sabhiya again rejoiced, while being inspired and grateful, listening as he did to the Blessed One's response, and with his heart and mind full of joy, he asked his next question. By acquiring what can one attain to perfect knowledge? How is one meticulously examined? In what way can one become full of effort? And for what reason is one called a thoroughbred? May the Blessed One please explain these to me. And the Blessed One replied in the following manner. Sabhiya, by examining all the knowledges available, whether those of recluses or Brahmins, one dismisses all feelings attached to them, remaining unblemished by the passions, as he goes beyond all knowledge. Thus, he becomes the one who attains to perfect knowledge. Having understood both internally and externally the proliferation of materiality and mentality, the root cause of disease, one is then released from all the roots that pervasively tie one up to suffering. In this way, one becomes meticulously examined. Refraining from all evil actions, exerting oneself with persistence, and leaving behind all hellish misery, his perseverance is relentless, always arousing himself with renewed effort to steadily endeavor with resoluteness, despite everything. It is in such a way that one becomes full of effort. Having severed the fetters both internally and externally, cut loose from their roots and sticky snares, being finally released from all entanglements that bind, he is the one recognized as the thoroughbred. Hearing these words, the wandering ascetic Sabhiya felt his heart gladden and rejoice even more, while being thankful for the Blessed One's words as he continued to ask his next question. By acquiring what can one be said to be wisely learned? In what way can one be called noble one? How can one be developed in good conduct? And how does one become a wandering ascetic? May the Blessed One please explain these to me. And the Blessed One replied by saying, Sabhiya, by seeing the true essence behind all phenomena, directly knowing the Dhamma wherever one looks in the world, for he has conquered both the faulty and the faultless. With unprecedented certainty in his heart, wherever he is to be, he remains untroubled and released. This is the one said to be wisely learned. Having cut himself free from the contaminants, he no longer settles anywhere. Directly knowing this for oneself, he does not come to any womb again. Uprooting the threefold sannyas that defile, with no further substrates to seek out further or rely upon, he indeed is the one known as a noble one, the one living the holy life, having seen the Dhamma, who's established in higher virtuous behavior while understanding the teachings, living with versatility while freed from all inner agitation, with his heart thus liberated from both attachment and revulsion. It is he who is considered one of good conduct. Whatever intended actions that ripen into suffering and distress, whether above, below, all around, and in between, he completely gives them all up, dropping conceit, craftiness, greed, and anger, as he puts an end to Namarupa, which makes him the one to be called the wandering ascetic, the one accomplished indeed. Then, in hearing these long-awaited responses spoken by the Blessed One, the wandering ascetic Sabhiya, feeling grateful, inspired, and utterly pleased, quietly and with utmost care, arose from his seat, and by arranging his upper robe on one shoulder, and with his palms gently joined in front of his heart, came closer and began venerating the Blessed One while speaking these heartfelt verses. O great teacher of vast wisdom, you who have transcended the dark flood, crossing over the 63 wrong views of the wandering ascetics, doctrines that are false refuge, each and every one, depending on nothing more than hearsay, baseless concepts, conclusions about others' statements, and empty words. You have gone to the very end, the further shore, existing beyond suffering. You are the Arahant, rightfully self-awakened, and I have firm faith that the Blessed One has destroyed all the contaminants. You are resplendent, wise beyond any measure. O finisher of dukkha, you have delivered me from suffering. Whatever doubts I had, you dispelled them by carrying me over to the other shore. I pay homage to you, O unequaled sage, you who dwell in the attainment of deep understanding. You are gentle and kind, O kinsman of the sun. Whatever uncertainties I had earlier, the Wise One dispelled them for me. Being the one who sees in the pitch blackness of ignorance, you indeed are the all-knowing sage with no hindrances left. All your troubles are cut at their roots and made useless. You are a result of the Dhamma, self-tamed, cooled, and the essence of truth. O best of men, great hero, the greatest of Nagas, all gods rejoice in listening to your words, including the Naradas and Pabbajjās. Homage to you, O thoroughbred. Homage to you, O greatest of men. In the vastness of world systems, whether of gods or humans, there is none to compare to you. You are the awakened one. You are the generous teacher. You are the sage who has conquered Māgha. You have removed all the underlying corruptions, the anusayas, from the heart. And having crossed over, you guide the rest of us, so we too could transcend and go to the other shore. You have gone beyond all endearments, with contaminants completely torn apart. You are a lion, free of grasping, having abandoned all fears, big or small. As a graceful lotus stands stainless above the surface, unsmeared whether by mud or water, you are unblemished, whether by good or evil. Kindly stretch your feet, O hero, so I may touch it with my head, for Sabhiya has found his teacher. Then Sabhiya, the wandering ascetic, by gently placing his head at the feet of the Blessed One, said, "It is excellent, Lord. It is marvelous, Bhante. The Blessed One has made the Dhamma clear to me in many ways. I feel as though the Tathagata has turned upright what was overturned, revealing what was hidden, showing the correct path to someone who was lost, as though one were to bring a lamp into the darkness for all those with eyesight to see. Bhante, I go for refuge to the Blessed One, to the Dhamma, and to the Sangha of bhikkhus. May I be given the going forth and the higher ordination in the Blessed One's presence." And the Blessed One said, "Sabhiya, anyone who has belonged earlier to another sect or belief system, who desires the going forth and the higher ordination in this dispensation, should stay under probation for 4 months, and only at the end of that 4 months period, if the bhikkhus are satisfied, they would give him the going forth and higher ordination. Although this is put in place, I nevertheless do recognize individual differences in this matter. Bhante, if it is so that anyone who has belonged earlier to another sect or belief system, who desires the going forth and the higher ordination in the Blessed One's dispensation, should stay under probation for 4 months, and only at the end of that 4 months period, if the bhikkhus are satisfied, they would give him the going forth and higher ordination, then I am willing to be under probation for 4 years, at the end of which may the bhikkhus be satisfied and give me the going forth and the higher ordination." Then the wandering ascetic Sabhiya obtained the going forth and the higher ordination in the dispensation of the Blessed One in his presence. Soon after his higher ordination, the Venerable Sabhiya, while living on his own, ardent, secluded, withdrawn from the crowd, diligently striving in his practice and with resoluteness, soon realized for himself with direct knowledge and in this very life the highest goal of the holy life, for the sake of which good sons of families rightly go forth from the lay life into homelessness. And he personally knew and understood with absolute certainty Now, birth is destroyed. The holy life has been fully lived. What had to be completed has now been completed. There is no more rebirth into any state of becoming, with nothing more to wish for. And the Venerable Sabhiya became one of the Arahants. Sutta Nipāta 3.7 Sela Sutta, to Sela, the Brahmin. I have personally heard this. At one time, the Blessed One was journeying through the country of Apanas, accompanied by a large sangha of bhikkhus, who were closely following him, one by one, all 1,250 of them, when he entered the town named Apana. Then the matted-hair ascetic Kokāliya heard. The well-known recluse Gautama, son of the royal Sakyans, is now journeying through the country of Apanas, accompanied by a large sangha of bhikkhus, who are closely following him, one by one, all 1,250 of them, and they have now all entered our town of Apana. He then reflected on the fact that the Blessed One had, at that time, already gained the delightful reputation of being an Arahant, the perfectly awakened one, endowed with sublime knowledge and supremely pure conduct, the well-gone, the knower of worlds, the incomparable tamer of those to be tamed, the teacher of gods and humans, enlightened and blessed. And having realized and understood this world with a direct knowledge, together with its gods and humans, Maras, Brahmas, as well as the community of recluses and Brahmins, he reveals it, making it known for everyone. He teaches the Dhamma that is beautiful in its beginning, beautiful in its middle, and beautiful in its end. He does this while giving its full and correct meaning and phrasing, clearly revealing thus the spiritual life that is utterly perfect and pure. Therefore, it would be wonderful indeed to be able to see such Arahants. Then the matted-hair ascetic Kokāliya went and approached the Blessed One, and after exchanging friendly greetings with him, sat to one side. And the Blessed One encouragingly spoke as he inspired, instructed, roused, and gladdened the matted-hair ascetic Kokāliya's heart with an enlivening talk on the Dhamma. Afterwards, Kokāliya, the matted-hair ascetic, addressed the Blessed One and said, "May the Blessed One please accept my dana offering for tomorrow's meal, accompanied together with the sangha of bhikkhus." When this was said, the Blessed One said, "Kokāliya, the sangha of bhikkhus is too large for a meal dana, as they are 1,250 in number. In addition, offering this meal to the sangha of bhikkhus headed by the Tathagata, given that you are a devout Brahmin, might provoke and displease your fellow Brahmins." For the second time, however, Kokāliya invited the Blessed One to accept his meal offering by stating, "Master Gautama, however big in number the sangha of bhikkhus might be, even 1,250 in quantity, the Brahmins will remain quite pleased, for they know I am favorably disposed to them. Therefore, may the Blessed One please accept tomorrow's meal from me, together with the entire sangha of bhikkhus." And for the second time the Blessed One said, "Kokāliya, the sangha of bhikkhus is too large for a meal dana, as they are 1,250 in number. In addition, offering this meal to the sangha of bhikkhus headed by the Tathagata, given that you are a devout Brahmin, might provoke and displease your fellow Brahmins." And for the third time Kokāliya replied, "Master Gautama, however big in number the sangha of bhikkhus might be, even 1,250 in quantity, the Brahmins will remain quite pleased, for they know I am favorably disposed to them. Therefore, may the Blessed One please accept tomorrow's meal from me, together with the entire sangha of bhikkhus." Then the Blessed One accepted the invitation in silence. Understanding that the Blessed One accepted his offer for a meal for the Sangha, Kaniya arose from his seat and went to his hermitage, as he addressed his friends and blood relatives by saying, "Good sirs, please listen up. I have invited the recluse Gautama, together with his Sangha of bhikkhus, for tomorrow's meal. I ask that you help me with the necessary preparations, by doing whatever needs to be done to make everything ready for tomorrow's meal." By saying, "Very well, sir," his audience accepted his request and went straight to work. Some began digging out ovens in the ground. Others went and chopped wood for firing up the furnaces. Some began cleaning up and preparing the water jars for washing, while others spread out the carpeting and cushions for seating. Meanwhile, the matted hair ascetic Kaniya himself worked on preparing the great assembly hall, setting up where the meal was to be hosted. It was during that time that the Brahmin Sela was living in Apana. He was known as an expert, a master of the Vedic threefold knowledge, a learned preserver and reciter, able to repeat the sequence of words and sounds, the hymns of the Vedas, together with the rites and rituals, with their vocabularies, etymology, phonology, and histories. He was also skilled in their philosophy and grammar. He knew how to interpret the marks of a great man. In all this, along with the various mantras, Sela was teaching to 300 young Brahmin men as he passed them down through the oral tradition. Now, Kaniya, the matted hair ascetic, used to admire Sela and was a devout follower of his. So it was on that day of preparations for the meal dana when Sela, the Brahmin, who had been strolling back and forth for some exercise through the town, accompanied by his 300 students, decided to visit his friends, the matted hair ascetic Kaniya's hermitage. On meeting his friend, the matted hair ascetic Kaniya, and once their friendly greetings were over, seeing him busy at work with preparations at the hermitage, while others were digging out ovens in the ground, chopping wood for firing up the furnaces, others cleaning up and preparing the water jars for washing, while still others were spreading out carpeting and cushions for seating, as well as Kaniya himself, who was engaged in arranging the great assembly hall, Sela, out of curiosity, asked his friend, Kaniya, the matted hair ascetic, "Well there, my dear Kaniya, what is all this arrangement for? Is it your son's or daughter's wedding ceremony you are preparing for? Or is there a grand sacrifice about to be made for which you are preparing? Or is it King Bimbisara of Magadha himself who has been invited to attend tomorrow, along with his entire army?" "No, dear Sela," responded Kaniya, the matted hair ascetic, as he continued. "It is not my son's or daughter's wedding ceremony I am preparing for, nor is King Bimbisara of Magadha attending tomorrow, along with his entire army. However, I am indeed preparing a grand sacrifice for tomorrow. You see, I have invited the recluse Gautama from the Sakya and Khattiya royal family, who has gone forth from the security of home life into homelessness. The well-known recluse Gautama, son of the royal Sakyans, has been journeying through our country of Apanas, accompanied by a large Sangha of bhikkhus, all 1,250 of them. He has now, along with his bhikkhus, entered Apana. The Blessed One has gained the delightful reputation of being an arahant, the perfectly awakened one, endowed with sublime knowledge and supremely pure conduct, the well-gone, the knower of worlds, the incomparable tamer of those to be tamed, the teacher of gods and humans, the Buddha and most blessed. And today, I have invited him for tomorrow's meal, together with the large Sangha of bhikkhus." "Did you say Buddha, my dear Kaniya?" interjected Sela, the Brahmin. Yes, dear Sela, I said Buddha, replied Kania, the matted hair ascetic. Did you say Buddha, my dear Kania? Again asked Sela, the Brahmin. Yes, dear Sela, I said Buddha, replied Kania again, the matted hair ascetic. Then the Brahmin Sela began thinking. Even hearing the utterance of the sound Buddha is so rare in the world. The sacred hymns we have today that are handed down to us speak distinctly about the 32 marks of a great man, the possessor of which could only have one of two possible options in the manner of life one is to have, and not another. We, therefore, know that if the possessor of these marks chooses to lead the life of a householder, then inevitably he becomes a universal, wheel-turning monarch, a just and virtuous king who would rule the country with all its vast 4 quarters. As he comes to possess the 7 treasures, which are the treasure of the wheel, the treasure of the elephant, the treasure of the horse, the treasure of all jewels, the treasure of the wife, the treasure of all treasurers, and the treasure of all advisers. He would have more than 1,000 sons, all wise, courageous, and virtuous heroic figures themselves, who defeat all threats by crushing any enemies that come challenging them. Thus, as the universal wheel-turning monarch, he would rule the country peacefully, surrounded by the ocean, without the use of violence, swords, or weapons, or punishments. But if he were to leave the household life and go forth, he most certainly would become an arahant, the fully self-awakened one, who would pull away the veil of ignorance from the eyes of all beings in the world. Now, please tell me, good Kania, where is the Blessed One, the arahant, the fully self-awakened one now? Where is he staying? And Kania, the matted hair ascetic, stretched out his right hand and pointed in a certain direction, exclaiming, There, my dear Sela, you will find him in that deep, dark blue forest. Then the Brahmin Sela, along with his 300 young Brahmins, quickly went in the direction of the Blessed One. But while on his way, he addressed the young Brahmins by saying, Now, good sirs, please approach very quietly, by making as little noise as possible, while you raise one foot and place it down after the other. For the Blessed Ones prefer living alone and far from noise. They live in seclusion like lions. And when you see me conversing with the recluse Gautama, do not move or budge, nor make any conversation among yourselves, and only speak when our conversation has ended. Then the Brahmin Sela approached the Blessed One, and after exchanging friendly greetings, he sat to one side and quietly began examining the 32 marks of a great man. Once he had carefully observed all of the marks of a great man, except for the last 2, he became unsure and perplexed as a result, unable to reach a conclusion. Thus, he began having doubts, for he had no way of examining them to see if the Blessed One had his genital area sheathed, and whether his tongue was long enough to cover his entire face. Meanwhile, the Blessed One knew what the confused Brahmin Sela was thinking, and how, after having scrutinized most of the marks of a great man on the Blessed One, he was unable to examine the presence of the last 2 marks, and because of that, he was now having doubts. So, the Blessed One psychically willed it for the Brahmin Sela to personally see his sheathed genital area, as well as his tongue that was long enough to cover his entire face. Thus the Blessed One extended his tongue out, and with it touched both earlobes, nostrils, and the whole forehead, and even covered up the entire face with it. This he revealed only to the Brahmin Sela. Then the thought occurred to the Brahmin Sela. How wonderful indeed! The recluse Gautama is most definitely endowed with all the 32 marks of a great man. However, we do not yet know whether he is awakened or not. I have heard it being said by the learned and wise elder Brahmins of the past, who were considered to be the teachers of teachers, how with the Arahants, the fully self-awakened Buddhas, when others speak genuinely in praise of them, they would reveal themselves in glorious ways. Now, what if I were to speak heartfelt praises to the recluse Gautama with meaningful and inspired verses? Thus, the Brahmin Sela began addressing the Blessed One in verses of praise. O Blessed One, having the most perfect of features, truly you are handsome, possessing such lovely and excellent features, for which you are so beautiful to behold. With your golden-hued skin, so vibrantly full of energy and alive you are, with your brilliantly white teeth. Being well born, with your glowing skin and perfect body, truly you possess indeed all of the marks that a great man is supposed to have, all of which I see now with my own eyes, so evidently displayed as I gaze upon you. Your eyes are so clear and bright, with such a beautiful and perfect mouth, a straight and majestic body, and strong presence, sitting splendidly as you are in the middle of the Sangha of recluses. You shine brilliantly like the sun. For a bhikkhu to have skin that glistens like gold is so wonderful to behold. But when one possesses the most excellent of features and such a handsome appearance, why would anyone give up everything and become a recluse? You should become a universal wheel-turning monarch, the chief among the best of charioteers, conquering and dominating the four quarters, the supreme lord of India, the land of Jambudipa. You ought to have powerful kings as your faithful subjects, along with all other Khattiya warrior kings and their princes, all following your supreme rule as your loyal subordinates. O Gautama, you should be the king among all kings, winning and ruling over all mankind. And the Blessed One said, I am the king, Sela, the incomparable and supreme king of Dhamma. With my teaching, I set forth the wheel of Dhamma rolling, which can never be stopped nor rolled back. Then the Brahmin Sela said, You declare yourself as fully self-awakened, the incomparable and supreme king of Dhamma. With my teaching, I set forth the wheel of Dhamma rolling. These you state, O Gautama. If you are the king, then who is your close disciple, your true general, the grand marshal of the Dhamma, you set rolling? The one who closely follows in your footsteps, who would keep the wheel of Dhamma continuing to roll after you. And the Blessed One said, Sela, this incomparable wheel of Dhamma which I have set rolling is kept in motion by my disciple Sariputta, who continues its momentum after the Tathagata. Whatever should be realized, I have realized. What should be cultivated and developed, I have cultivated and developed. What should be relinquished and eliminated, I have relinquished and eliminated. Therefore, Brahmin, I am the Buddha. So just let go of your doubts and perplexity, O Brahmin, and simply trust. After all, it is so difficult to have this opportunity indeed, to look upon a living Buddha and be in his presence. I am the Buddha. That which is so rare to occur in existence has finally taken place. The unsurpassable surgeon has finally appeared in the world. Having become the Holy One, I have destroyed and crushed the armies of Mara. I have vanquished and silenced all enemies, and now I live happily, secure, and with no fear in my heart from any quarter. Then Sela the Brahmin, turning to his students, exclaimed, "Pay close attention now, good sirs, and listen carefully to what is spoken by the one possessing the eye of wisdom, the surgeon, the great hero who roars like a mighty lion in the jungle. Behold the Holy One himself, the one who has destroyed the armies of Mara. How could anyone who lays eyes on him still have doubts? How could anyone not be immediately inspired with intense faith, even if one were to be a lowborn with a dark heart? And now, those among you who wish to continue following me, you may stay, and those of you who do not, you are free to go. I have finally found my true teacher, a Buddha in the flesh. Therefore, I, here and now, am going forth in his presence in the very dispensation of the one possessing the eye of wisdom." Then the 300 young Brahmin students turned to their teacher Sela and spoke. "If you, sir, being pleased as you are and moved so deeply by the dispensation of the fully self-awakened one to decide to go forth, then we also will go forth alongside you, in his presence, in the very dispensation of the one possessing the eye of wisdom." And by turning to the Blessed One, the Brahmin Sela spoke the following words: "O Blessed One, I, along with these 300 Brahmin students of mine, with our hands and our hearts in respectful Anjali, now ask for your permission to go forth in your presence so that we may lead the holy life." The Blessed One said, "Sela, the holy life is well proclaimed indeed. It truly is to be seen and lived by oneself here and now, for it is immediately effective and not to be postponed nor delayed. The truth of this is experienced personally by all those who meaningfully go forth and train with diligent effort." And there, in the presence of the Buddha, the Brahmin Sela, together with his 300 students, obtained the going forth and the higher ordination in the dispensation of the Blessed One. Meanwhile, Kaniya, the matted hair ascetic, worked throughout the night along with his assembly of helpers, as they prepared a variety of healthy and delicious foods and drinks in his hermitage. And once everything was ready, he sent someone to go and inform the Blessed One. "It is time, Bhante. The food is now ready." Thereupon, early in the morning, having put on his robes and by taking his outer robe and alms bowl, together with the Sangha of bhikkhus, the Blessed One went to Kaniya's hermitage, as he sat on the prepared seat, followed by the other bhikkhus. Then Kaniya, the matted hair ascetic, began serving with his own hands the Sangha of bhikkhus headed by the Buddha, a variety of sumptuous and delicious foods, with both the hard and soft kinds, as well as healthy and nutritious drinks. Later, when the Blessed One had finished his meal and had removed his hand from the bowl, Kaniya took a low seat as he sat to one side, and the Blessed One expressed his appreciation for the generosity of the host by uttering the following verses. "Among sacrifices that people make, the fire sacrifice is considered to be the chief. The ancient Savitti is considered to be the chief among poetic hymns. Among human beings, the king is considered to be the chief. And among all rivers, the ocean is considered to be their chief. Among all celestial bodies in the night sky, the moon is considered to be the chief. Among the brightest of stars, the sun is considered to be their chief. And among those who receive offerings from those seeking the greatest of merits, the Sangha of bhikkhus is their chief. And once having spoken these words, the Blessed One arose from his seat and departed. Then the Venerable Sela, along with his companions, living alone and secluded from the crowd, striving heedfully and with resolution, while practicing diligently, before long, he here and now realized for himself the noble end of the holy life, as he himself experienced that unsurpassed understanding for which sons of good families rightfully leave the household life with its burdensome troubles by choosing to become homeless. And the Venerable Sela, together with his 300 students, came to know with direct knowledge and certainty unparalleled that birth is finally destroyed. Now the holy life is fully lived. What should have been done is finally done. There is no more coming back to any state of becoming ever again. Thus, the Venerable Sela, along with his 300 students, all became arahants. Then the Venerable Sela went and approached the Blessed One, while being accompanied by his companions, and by arranging his upper robe over one shoulder, with hands over his heart, he directed them towards the Blessed One, as he spoke these verses. It has been 8 days since we all came to you and took you as our refuge, O Blessed Lord. For 7 days we have trained and become tamed in your dispensation. You are the Buddha. You are the teacher, the sage who has vanquished and overcome Mara. You are the one who, by having himself completely cut off all the underlying tendencies and crossed over, you have helped us all to cross over too. All things that people cherish and hold on to, you have dodged altogether, and by shattering and tearing into pieces the contaminants that defile the heart, you grasp at nothing any more. With no fear whatsoever, no dread left in you, you indeed are a lion. And now, here, in your presence, have come these 300 bhikkhus with their pressed hands over their hearts, full of tearful gratitude. O great hero, kindly stretch out your feet, and let these Nagas pay homage by bowing at their teacher's feet. Sutta Nipāta 3.8 Salla Sutta, the Arrow. Ultimately, the life of mortals remains insignificant, and the length of time they are to live uncertain. It is brief and crowded with countless difficulties and troubles, with suffering that is ever present and never far away. There is no remedy through which all those who are born will somehow not die and perish. Even if one were to reach old age, death will remain certain, for such is the nature of all living beings. Just like with ripened fruits, there is always the fear of falling. Likewise, for all those who are born or will be born, there is the constant fear of the inevitability of dying. All clay pots, once made by the potter, sooner or later will break and come to destruction in the end. In the same way, sooner or later, the life of mortals gets to be destroyed in the end. Whether young or old, whether they are fools or wise, everyone, from the moment of their birth, find themselves under the sway of death, as they sooner or later reach the finish line, that is, death. As the person is dying, about to leave this world, and on their way to the other realm of becoming, no protection could be provided for them. Neither a loving father could save his only son, nor any close friend or blood relative could ever keep one from being taken by death. Even as loved ones or relatives surround one and impotently look on, crying and lamenting at their impending loss, one by one all mortals are led away, just as cows are taken away by the butcher to the slaughterhouse. In this manner, the entire world is afflicted by aging and death, and by knowing and understanding this basic nature of the world, the wise simply do not grieve. Not knowing or understanding the path taken by beings as they arrive to birth in this life, or when the time will come for them to depart from it, leaving everything behind, one mourns and cries uselessly. What is the use of your wailing, or in pulling out your hair? For if there were any benefits to be gained from such insanity, then wise men would be engaging in such activities as well. After all, the heart cannot find peace nor becomes soothed through sobbing and lamenting, because by doing so, more anguish and sorrow will arise, along with agitation in the mind, as the body bears the brunt of it all. Thus, by harming oneself, the body becomes emaciated and malnourished, as it loses its luster and becomes a ghost of its former self. Meanwhile, all this does nothing whatsoever to help the dead, who are now far beyond your reach, and all your sobbing proves to be in vain. By not accepting nor giving up the grief one feels in one's heart, beings only end up experiencing much more of it. Replaying scenes from the past, the nostalgia of times gone by when the dead were still alive, turns those who are left behind into perpetual victims of grief. You think you are alone? Look at all the others too, lying on their deathbeds. See how each one inescapably goes according to the actions they have done throughout life. And as the hour of death approaches, they all become confused and flounder like fish out of water. For whatever they keep thinking about or imagine while still alive only ends up being completely different than expected when they face the inescapable reality of death in its fullness. Such is the true nature of separating from the familiar. Observe now and identify this unchanging fact about the world. Even if a human being lives for 100 years or more, the time will come when they must leave it all behind. Not just their own physical bodies and assets, but their loved ones and acquaintances too. Therefore, by having listened to the words of the Arahant, train yourself with dedication and relinquish all this wailing and lamenting. And as you see the dead, think wisely by reminding yourself that nothing I can do could bring them back, for I will not see them ever again. Just like when one's home is on fire, one quickly rushes in to pour water over the blazing flames. Likewise, the resolute, resourceful, and learned wise person among humans, quickly and without wasting time, rushes in to address the grief that comes up in one's heart. While he does so, as speedily as the wind carries off the tiny tuft of cotton wool along with it on its path. Wailing and lamenting with anguish in one's heart is ultimately no one else's but one's own, to either be released from entirely or continue re-experiencing. But those desiring the end of suffering know how each one is responsible for pulling out one's own arrow of ignorance once and for all. And by having removed the arrow from oneself, one finally enjoys true peace and tranquility within the heart. Thus, one transcends all sorrow, living without any shackles or fears, sorrowless and fully released. Sutta Nipāta 3.9 Vāseṭṭha Sutta. To the young Brahmin, Vāseṭṭha. I have personally heard this. At one time, the Blessed One was living in the forest of Iccanangala, close to the village of Iccanangala. During that time, many well-known Brahmin householders lived in the town of Iccanangala, including the Brahmins Chanki, Tarukha, Pokharasati, Janusoni, Todaya, and other prominent Brahmin householders. It was during one of those days that the two young Brahmins, Vāseṭṭha and Bharadvāja, while walking and wandering for exercise, were having a conversation that soon turned into an argument, as one tried convincing the other thus: "Friend, how does one become a Brahmin?" And the young Brahmin Bharadvāja replied, "If, friend, someone is unsoiled and pure by birth, on both the mother's and father's sides, as far back as 7 generations, then he is to be known as a Brahmin." However, his friend, the young Brahmin Vāseṭṭha, said, "Actually, friend, when someone lives with virtue and behaves with good conduct, only then does he become a Brahmin." But no matter what either of them could try to say to convince the other with their argument, they kept disputing, until the young Brahmin Vāseṭṭha said to his friend, the young Brahmin Bharadvāja, "Friend Bharadvāja, there is the recluse Gautama, son of the Sakyans, who has gone forth from the Sakyan clan, and already gained the delightful reputation for being an arahant, the perfectly awakened one, endowed with sublime knowledge and supremely pure conduct, the well-gone, the knower of worlds, the incomparable tamer of those to be tamed, the teacher of gods and humans, the Buddha, and most blessed. Let us now go and approach him, and ask him this question, and as he explains it to us, so shall we go ahead and just accept it." "Agreed," said the young Brahmin Bharadvāja, being delighted with the proposal made by his friend, the young Brahmin Vāseṭṭha. So the two young men went and approached the Blessed One, and after exchanging friendly greetings with him, they both sat to one side. Then the young Brahmin Vāseṭṭha addressed the Blessed One in verse: "Sir, the two of us have been acknowledged by our respective teachers as experts in the 3 Vedas, which I have learned and mastered through my teacher Pokharasati, whereas my friend learned and mastered them through his teacher Tarukha. We both can recite the 3 Vedas in their entirety, in addition to explaining all its finer details through the meaning of words and their grammar. For truly we are now authorities in our own right, just like our own esteemed teachers. O Gautama, there is now a dispute between us two. The argument we are having has to do with birth and that of being a Brahmin. Bharadvāja here keeps saying that only through birth can one truly be known as a Brahmin. But I, on the other hand, insist that it is through one's own actions that one becomes a Brahmin. This, therefore, is our dispute, for the resolution of which we have come to you, O wise one, with clear vision. We each seem to be unable to convince the other, so we have now come to ask for the answer to our query from the one who is recognized by the many and renowned far and wide as the awakened one. Just as people greet the new moon with so much reverence, with their hands in anjali in front of their hearts, similarly, the world is worshipful towards you, as they come to pay homage to the great Gautama with so much veneration and respect. Therefore, we ask the great Gautama the following question: Does one become a Brahmin by birth or by their actions? For we are unsure of the answer to this question ourselves. Please kindly explain to us while instructing us on how to identify a true Brahmin. The Blessed One then said, Vāseṭṭha, I will give the answer to your question, as I explain it to you in a step-by-step manner, while instructing you on how the process takes place, whereby living beings come to be born, as they find themselves reappearing in the various classes of becoming. Look at the grass and the trees. Although they are not self-aware, nevertheless, they have their own unique qualities, features, and attributes that are peculiar to each, indicative of their individual births, as distinct species among a widely diverse population of other plant life. And when you look at various insects, such as ants, beetles, mosquitoes, or grasshoppers, there too you will find that they also have their own unique qualities, features, and attributes that are peculiar to each, indicative of their individual births as distinct species among a widely diverse population of other insects. When you look at animals with 4 feet, whether small or large, there too you will find that they also have their own unique qualities, features, and attributes that are peculiar to each, indicative of their individual births as distinct species among a widely diverse population of other 4-legged animals. And if you were to look at the footless animals, such as snakes and serpents with their long backs, slithering as they move about on their bellies, there too you will find that they also have their own unique qualities, features, and attributes that are peculiar to each, indicative of their individual births as distinct species among a widely diverse population of other footless animals. When you look at fish and other animals living and looking for food and water, there too you will find that they also have their own unique qualities, features, and attributes that are peculiar to each, indicative of their individual births as distinct species among a widely diverse population of other aquatic animals. When you look at the birds and other animals with wings that fly through the air, there too you will find that they also have their own unique qualities, features, and attributes that are peculiar to each, indicative of their individual births as distinct species among a widely diverse population of other avian animals. Now, as it relates to all these different living beings and animals, although the variety of attributes and features these beings possess, given their diversity as species, is entirely dependent on their individual birth. However, in the case of human beings, their diversity and unique qualities are not defined by one's birth, not by the hair, the head, the ears, nor the eyes, not by the mouth, the nose, the lips, nor the eyelashes, not by the neck, the shoulders, the belly, the stomach, nor the back, not by the buttocks, the chest, and not by their reproductive organs, not by the hands, the feet, the fingers, or the nails, nor by the knees or the calves, not by the color of their skin or the voice. None of these qualities or attributes, nor the distinctive traits, could tell one of their birth, nor identify one as belonging to a specific species, as it would in the case of other animals or living beings. For such individual differences in appearance are mere designations for conventional purposes. The attributes or qualities of the bodies of humans do not designate the birth of the individual as higher or lower. Instead, valid designation of differences between individuals arises as a result of the activities of human beings. Thus, Vāseṭṭha, Whoever among human beings makes their livelihood by raising and looking after cattle, he is designated as a farmer, not a Brahmin. Whoever, Vāseṭṭha, among human beings makes their livelihood by engaging in various crafts and other professions, he is designated as a craftsman or professional, not a Brahmin. Also, Vāseṭṭha, whoever among human beings makes their livelihood by trading, he is designated as a merchant, not a Brahmin. Similarly, Vāseṭṭha, whoever among human beings makes their livelihood by serving or working for others, he is designated as a servant or worker, not a Brahmin. Whoever, Vāseṭṭha, among human beings makes their livelihood by stealing and taking from others what is not freely given, he is designated as a thief or crook, not a Brahmin. Whoever, Vāseṭṭha, among human beings makes their livelihood as an archer or marksman in service of those in power, he is designated as a soldier, not a Brahmin. Whoever, Vāseṭṭha, among human beings makes their livelihood by means of priesthood and conducting rituals, he is designated as an advisor to the king or one who engages in sacrifice, and not a Brahmin. And Vāseṭṭha, whoever among human beings lives his life while forcing others to pay him taxes and tolls throughout the kingdom, meanwhile he enjoys all that those resources and wealth could provide, he is designated as a ruler or king, not a Brahmin. Therefore, I do not declare someone a Brahmin because he was born from the womb of a woman, whom the world designates a Brahmin herself. For so long as someone has attachments to things, along with defiling impediments in his heart, then he is no Brahmin at all, because, given his conceited tendencies and ignorance, he looks down at others, addressing them disrespectfully. However, if he has no attachments in his heart, desiring nothing, not wanting to seize or grab anything whatsoever, then it is such a person whom I declare a Brahmin. Whoever, having successfully cut oneself free from all fetters that shackle and bind, now finds himself no longer agitated, worried, or anxious, being thus fully detached and unyoked from all shackles, it is such a person whom I declare a Brahmin. By cutting the straps and tight belt of longing, while getting rid of the reins and all fastening tethers that hold everything together, and with every obstacle in between removed, one is finally awakened. It is such a person whom I declare a Brahmin. If one has the iron will to endure abuse, even while being imprisoned or beaten up, while resisting even the tiniest amount of anger from flaring up in his heart, as he cultivates his army of patience and does so against all odds, it would be such a person whom I declare a Brahmin. Not getting angry or becoming irritable given unpleasant and painful situations, behaving with virtue, neither pretentious nor conceited, and while being restrained in his conduct throughout, he bears his very last body. It is such a person whom I call a true Brahmin. When a person does not allow himself to get soiled by sensual pleasures, just like water that does not cling or stay on a lotus leaf, or a mustard seed that cannot be balanced onto the tip of an arrowhead, which would instead simply fall off, it is such a person whom I call a Brahmin. Whoever in this world has come to understand suffering for what it is and how it is laid to rest, while he detaches himself from the personality view and all self-identification, it is such a person whom I declare a Brahmin. With deep wisdom in his heart, whoever becomes skillful at identifying what indeed is the path, and therefore truly know and understand the Dhamma from all that is not the path, hence not the Dhamma, is such a person whom I declare a Brahmin. The one who gives up the desire to socialize with either householders or with those who have gone forth alike. The one, thus living with the fewness of wants and needs, it is such a person whom I declare a Brahmin. The one who has given up violence and hatred towards all living beings, be they weak or strong, giving up killing and harming altogether, nor instigating others to kill or harm. It is such a person whom I declare a Brahmin. He who chooses to remain non-hostile among those who are hostile and vicious, cool and peaceful among those who are prone to violence against oneself, not seizing or grabbing anything, even though one is surrounded by those who seize and grab. It is such a person whom I declare a Brahmin. With hatred and passions, along with conceit and contempt, all discarded from his heart and falling off, just like mustard seeds sliding off from the edge of a sword. It is such a person whom I declare a Brahmin. The one who instructs with words that are based on truth, delivered sweetly and with compassion, using speech that is clarifying and not harsh, nor with the intention to cause harm to others, but simply to bring out the truth while removing the dust of ignorance. It is such a person whom I declare a Brahmin. The one who does not take unoffered things that belong to others, be it small or large, something of much value, or that which isn't worth much, whether beautiful or ugly, it is such a person whom I declare a Brahmin. The one who lives without any hopes or longing for either this world or any other world, having unyoked himself from all expectations, it is such a person whom I declare a Brahmin. The one with no clinging left in him, and no place for him to settle and attach to. He who directly knows what should and should not be done, having already taken a deep dive into the deathless, it is such a person whom I declare a Brahmin. The one who has gone beyond both actions of merit and demerit, the wholesome and the unwholesome, and now rests without any sorrow, free from defilements and pure. It is such a person whom I declare a Brahmin. The one being extremely pure, shining brightly and undisturbed like the clear moon in the night sky, having fully exhausted all delight for further becomings, it is such a person whom I declare a Brahmin. The one who, by crossing over, has gone beyond this very difficult obstacle, this ordeal of a world, journeying through this impassably deluded and decrepit existence, and thus, having made it to the other shore, now rests at ease, as he meditates fearlessly. And with all doubts overcome, he is extinguished without seizing or grabbing onto anything any more. It is such a person whom I declare a Brahmin. The one who has given up sensual stimulations of all kinds, not turning his back to the very spirit of going forth, as he keeps renouncing all the time, empty of all longing for things. He who has destroyed all chances for re-becoming in any realm within the sensual world. It is such a person whom I declare a Brahmin. The one who has given up craving altogether, not turning his back to the very spirit of going forth, as he keeps renouncing all the time, empty of all longing for things. He who has destroyed all chances for re-becoming completely, it is such a person whom I declare a Brahmin. The one who not only discards the human yoke, but has entirely given up the heavenly yoke too, remaining unyoked from yokes of all kinds, it is such a person whom I declare a Brahmin. Having abandoned both enjoyment and loathing, becoming cool and calmed, without any assets left in him that would otherwise lead one back to rebirth, the one who is a conquering hero of the whole world. It is such a person whom I declare a Brahmin. The one who sees the dying of beings and also their reappearance in various realms, and despite all that remains unsoiled, blameless, the well gone, a Buddha. It is such a person whom I declare a Brahmin. The one whose movements remain untraceable and unreachable even by the gods, their heavenly musicians, or the best of humans. He who, by destroying all the contaminants of the heart, has now become an arahant. It is such a person whom I declare a Brahmin. The one for whom nothing of the past is left, nothing of the future to look forward to, and nothing in between to grab onto, and now dwells thus undefiled. It is such a person whom I declare a Brahmin. The leader and most excellent among men is he, the great hero of a sage, the fearless warrior, the one who has been washed clean, remaining imperturbable, the Buddha. It is such a person whom I declare a Brahmin. The one who knows his earlier births and is able to see both heavenly and hellish realms. The one who, by destroying birth itself, has now come to the very end. It is such a person whom I declare a Brahmin. So, as you see, the name and clan of a person are mere conventions used in the world, sheer superficial designations predicated by conformity and mutual assent, dependent on the conditional circumstances in reference to the individual in question. However, this wrong view has been perpetuated for a very long time, where generations of ignorant people have been entangled in lies. In this way, those who have no knowledge of reality and the truth in things continue telling the masses that a person becomes a Brahmin by birth. The truth is that no one becomes a Brahmin through birth, nor it is through birth that one becomes a non-Brahmin either. It is only through one's own deliberate and intentional actions that one can become a Brahmin. Only through one's own deliberate intentional actions does one become a non-Brahmin. It is by deliberate actions that one becomes a farmer. Through one's own deliberate actions, one turns into a craftsman. By actions alone does one become a merchant, and it is through deliberate actions that one becomes a servant or a worker. It is by deliberate and intentional actions that one becomes a thief and a crook. Through one's own intentional actions that one becomes a soldier. Only through one's deliberate actions does one become an advisor to the king, someone who engages in sacrifice for the ruler. And it is through deliberate intentional actions, too, that one becomes a king. In just this manner, the wise ones, by closely observing, understand as it truly is the truth in actions, and how it is the choice in one's actions that is at the base of all things. Thus, by clearly seeing the principle of dependent arising at play everywhere, they directly come to know the fruits and consequences of deliberate, intentional actions. It is through actions that the world keeps revolving, and it is through actions by which people continue existing. Beings are bound to actions, and they keep going on, much like the linchpin of the chariot that keeps the wheels rolling. It is through exerting energy and the necessary perseverance in leading the holy life. It is through self-restraint and through the control and taming of oneself, whereby a Brahmin is born. And that is what makes the most noble of Brahmins. Thus, Vāseṭṭha, the one who possesses the three knowledges, is peacefully appeased. And with rebirth completely destroyed, it is him you should recognize as none other than Brahma and Sakka in the flesh, That is for those who have eyes to see." When this was said, the two young Brahmins, Vāseṭṭha and Bharadvāja, addressed the Blessed One by saying, "It is excellent, Master Gautama. It is marvelous, O Blessed One. The Blessed Lord has clarified the Dhamma for us in many ways, as though he were to turn upright what had been turned upside down, revealing what was hidden, showing the way to one who was lost, holding up a lamp in the dark for those with eyesight to see. Bhante, we go to the Blessed One for refuge, and to the Dhamma, and to the Sangha of bhikkhus. May the Blessed One accept us as his lay disciples who have taken refuge in him from today until the end of our lives." Sutta Nipāta 3.10 Kokāliya Sutta. To the Bhikkhu Kokāliya. I have personally heard this. At one time, when the Blessed One was staying in Savatthi at the monastery offered by Anathapindika in Jeta's park, the Bhikkhu Kokāliya approached the Blessed One, and after paying homage to him, sat to one side and said, "Bhante, Sariputta and Moggallana have evil desires in their hearts. Their hearts are under the influence of evil and bad thoughts." When this was said, the Blessed One replied, "Do not say that, Kokāliya. Kokāliya, do not speak like that. Have faith in your heart for Sariputta and Moggallana. They are well-behaved, kind, and amiable bhikkhus." For a second time, however, the Bhikkhu Kokāliya said to the Blessed One, "Even though I have faith in my heart towards the Blessed One, who inspires confidence and trust in me, I believe Sariputta and Moggallana have evil desires in their hearts. Their hearts are under the influence of evil and bad thoughts." And for the second time the Blessed One responded, "Do not say that, Kokāliya. Kokāliya, do not speak like that. Have faith in your heart for Sariputta and Moggallana. They are well-behaved, kind, and amiable bhikkhus." Again, however, for the third time, the Bhikkhu Kokāliya said, "Even though I have faith in my heart towards the Blessed One, who inspires confidence and trust in me, I believe Sariputta and Moggallana have evil desires in their hearts. Their hearts are under the influence of evil and bad thoughts." And for the third time the Blessed One said, "Do not say that, Kokāliya. Kokāliya, do not speak like that. Have faith in your heart for Sariputta and Moggallana. They are well-behaved, kind, and amiable bhikkhus." Once this was said, the Bhikkhu Kokāliya got up from his seat, and after paying homage to the Blessed One, he circumambulated him and went away. But soon after, Kokāliya's entire body broke out into boils the size of mustard seeds. The boils then quickly became the size of green mung beans and kept on increasing and growing into the size of chickpeas, then into the size of jujube seeds, then the size of myrobalan fruits, later into the size of unripe wood apples, and soon after into the size of ripened wood apples, until they finally burst open, with pus and blood oozing out from them. As a result of having these symptoms, the Bhikkhu Kokāliya died, and was immediately reborn into the Padhāna hell realm, as a result of carrying such bitter hatred and ill will in his heart towards the Venerable Sariputta and Moggallana. Then, when the night was far advanced, Brahma Sahambhati approached the Blessed One, while illuminating the entire Jeta's park with his most splendid beauty and radiance, as he bowed and paid homage to the Blessed One, and then stood to one side and said, "Bhante, the Bhikkhu Kokāliya has died, and is now reborn in the Padhāna hell, as a result of carrying such bitter hatred and ill will in his heart towards the Venerable Sariputta and Moggallana. Having uttered these words, the Brahma Sahampati again paid his respect as he worshipped the Blessed One, and after circumambulating him, suddenly vanished from there. Then, in the morning, the Blessed One addressed the bhikkhus by saying, Bhikkhus, last night, when the night was far advanced, Brahma Sahampati approached me, while illuminating the entire Jada Park with his most splendid beauty and radiance. As he bowed and paid homage to me, then stood to one side and said, Bhante, the Bhikkhu Kokāliya has died and is now reborn in the Padhāna hell, as a result of carrying such bitter hatred and ill will in his heart towards the Venerable Sariputta and Moggallana. Having uttered these words, the Brahma Sahampati again paid his respects, and after worshipping and circumambulating me, he then vanished. Then a certain bhikkhu asked the Blessed One, Bhante, how long is the lifespan in the Padhāna hell? And the Blessed One said, Bhikkhu, the lifespan in the Padhāna hell is very long. In fact, it is not easy to measure the lifespan there in terms of how many years, or how many hundreds of years, or how many thousands or hundreds of thousands of years. The bhikkhu then asked, In that case, Bhante, is it possible to give a simile or make a comparison? And the Blessed One said, Yes, bhikkhu, it is possible. Imagine a man who has a cartload of sesame seeds, which is 20 times the size of the Kosalan measure. Now imagine that once every 100 years, a man comes and takes away a single sesame seed out of that cartload of sesame seeds. Consider now the fact that those sesame seeds would run out faster than the lifespan is to be spent in the Abbuddha hell. It takes 20 such Abbuddha hell lifespans to make up a single Nirabbuddha hell lifespan. And it takes 20 such Nirabbuddha hell lifespans to make up one Abhava hell lifespan. It takes 20 such Abhava hell lifespans to make up one Ahaha hell lifespan. And it takes 20 Ahaha hell lifespans to make up one Atata hell lifespan. It takes 20 Atata hell lifespans to make up one Kumuda hell lifespan. And it would take 20 Kumuda hell lifespans to make up one Sogandhika hell lifespan. It takes 20 Sogandhika hell lifespan to make up a single Uppalaka hell lifespan. And it would take 20 Uppalaka hell lifespans to make up a single Pundarika hell lifespan, and 20 Pundarika hell lifespans to make up a single Paduma hell lifespan. Therefore, bhikkhu, it is in such a hell realm that the bhikkhu Kokāliya is now reborn into, as a result of carrying such bitter hatred and ill will in his heart towards the Venerables Sariputta and Moggallana. Then the holy, well-gone teacher continued on instructing the bhikkhus as he uttered these verses. When a human being is born, he finds out there is a loose axe placed neatly in his mouth, one which he uses to cut and harm himself and others, as he keeps on carelessly speaking like a fool. Thus, as one goes on praising those blameworthy ones who truly deserve to be criticized, while blaming those praiseworthy ones who deserve to be honored and cherished, one only ends up bringing to oneself terrible consequences, due to the evil spewing out from one's own lips. And as a result of such evil committed, that person will not find happiness, but only suffering. Even if one were to gamble away money, losing all one's wealth and possessions, along with one's life, that still would not be as terrible of a consequence as the one that results from having resentment and hatred towards the noble ones, whose heart is pure. Accusing and slandering the noble ones only leads one to be reborn into and spend 100,036 years within the Nirabbuddha hells, as well as 5 more years in the Abbuddha hells, all because of having deliberately thought and spoken with bad intentions against the truly holy ones whose heart is pure. Speaking what is untrue leads one straight to hell, as does lying about or denying what one has actually said while claiming, "Well, I never said that." Both of these low-born individuals are, after all, cut from the same cloth, as they are also equal in the destination they will be headed to immediately after death, all because of their cruel and merciless actions done against others. Offending the blameless, the ones who are undefiled in their hearts, being pure and unblemished, only leads the fool to face the evil they themselves produced, just like throwing fine sand against the incoming wind. A person addicted to greed does not hold back from attacking, bad-mouthing, and making fun of others. They are faithless, stingy, inconsiderate, and ungrateful, driven selfishly to backbiting. Slandering and foul-mouthed, they speak falsely, lacking even the tiniest of noble traits, condoning abortion and the destruction of lives. You who are doers of unspeakable actions, you are the lowest of humans, low-born and wicked. You work in the dark here while still alive, but soon you will be deposited in hell as soon as you breathe your last. Stirring up the minds and hearts of others, you cause much confusion while bringing more harm to yourself. You, evildoer, injuring those who are pure and appeased. Because of your evil practices, you will certainly fall into the very pit of hell and remain there for an incalculably long time. No action intentionally committed could ever disappear, for it will come to you sooner or later, as its original author will surely receive it, along with its momentum. In this way, that foolish evildoer finds himself in unspeakable misery when he opens his eyes in the next world. Fallen into hell with no waiting period, one is shocked to realize himself being impaled upon iron spikes, feeling the unimaginable pain from their sharp and jagged edges going through his body, whereas release from pain through death is craved every millisecond but never attained. And when feeling hungry, one soon finds food that is suitable for the place, burning red-hot iron balls being shoved down his throat, as he swallows them one after another, going right through him and out from the other end. Meanwhile, the brutal faces he encounters will have no kindness or compassion to offer him, for there is absolutely no hope for pleasant company or of sweet words to hear in that realm of torture, nor a shelter or safety to quickly escape to. Instead, he is tossed onto a bed of hot burning coals and stretched on their burning embers as he finds himself plunging in the fiery blaze. Being dragged out and away from the fiery blaze, next they are ruthlessly nailed down with iron hammers, and soon find themselves surrounded by the abyss of blinding darkness that is hell, spreading all around them like the great earth. Then they are pushed into large copper cauldrons, blazing with fire and boiling with molten metal. There they are cooked, roasted and boiled alive for a very long time, with no hope for escape, despite pushing and shoving themselves upwards to jump up, as they desperately try to find a way out, but to no avail. Then, in all that burning and screaming chaos, the evil-doer continues cooking in a foul-smelling broth made from pus and blood, with no respite to be found. Wherever he turns, he is touched by the very same painful experiences that he had wished upon his own enemies or brought upon them himself. There, the evil-doer continues to be cooked and boiled alive in that maggot-filled and worm-infested putrid water, from where no refuge or safety could ever be found. No shore to swim or escape to, for one is surrounded on all sides by such countless and enormous blazing copper cauldrons as far as the eyes could see. Once their time expires there, they are then shoved into Asipata, the forest of sharp swords, where, as they run through it or try to climb them to escape the horror, the razor-sharp leaves of the trees tear open their bodies, cutting and dismembering them into countless pieces. Suddenly, they are seized again and pulled down from the trees, where sharp hooks are used to grab them by their tongue, and then tossed from side to side while continuously being stabbed. Next, they go into the impassable Vetarani hell, where they encounter more sharp and jagged blades that cut through their soft bodies, bodies which cannot die. There, the imbecile evildoers continue to fall, with no hope of ever getting out as a result of their evil actions. And amid all the wailing and crying, they are chewed upon and devoured by vicious spotted dogs. Meanwhile, powerful birds of prey, vultures and crows, attack them from above, tearing into their flesh as they fight over the living bodies of the wicked evil-doers. Therefore, having to endure such an inescapable life that evildoers must face is beyond difficult. That is why, for the rest of one's life, the evildoer must strive diligently and never be negligent nor heedless in doing the right thing, doing his duty without fail, while engaging in wholesome actions that are the opposite of evil. With the cartload of sesame seeds having been counted by the wise, the measurement of the lifespan to be spent in the Paduma hell, they have found to be innumerable indeed, plus another 1,200 times 10 million years. Despite the unspeakable pain and suffering to be faced in hell, as explained here, one has to experience them for an incredibly long time during their incalculably lengthy stay in the hells. Therefore, the ones who are pure of heart, amiable, and with virtuous behavior must strive constantly to guard and protect the words they speak and the thoughts they engage in thinking in their mind. Sutta Nipāta 3.11 Nālaka Sutta to Nālaka. While secluded in his morning meditation, the sage Asita saw the luminescence of Sakka's retinue of 33 gods, joyful in their veneration of Indra, the king of the gods, their lord, rejoicing as they did, dressed in brilliantly colorful divine outfits, jubilantly waving their banners in celebration. Witnessing the devas in such a rejoicing mood, Asita, the sage, once having paid his homage to them, began to ask in his heart, "Why are the devas especially happy and pleased today? I wonder what the reason for all this celebratory jubilation might be, as they wave their divine banners. After all, even during the legendary war between the devas and asuras, when the gods achieved their hard-won victory against the demigods, there wasn't this much excitement or celebration in the air. I wonder what the cause for such hair-raisingly joyful cheers could be that today keeps pouring out from the heavenly realm of the 33. They cheer and chant with such delight, whistling, singing, and playing their divine musical instruments, clamping cymbals together as they dance. So I ask you who live at the summit of Mount Meru, O good sirs, please help me quickly clear up my confusion about this matter. Then the Devas of the 33 spoke to him by saying, That unsurpassable noble gem, aspiring supreme awakening for the welfare and benefit of all beings everywhere, is now born among you human beings. What a treasure and honor for you humans, for he is now reborn in the village of the Sakyans, in the state of Lumbini. It is because of this that we are celebrating. Therefore, we are exceedingly happy and joyful. He is indeed the most noble of beings, the chief bull among men, the supreme leader in all of existence. Like the powerful lion subduing all wild animals and beasts with his earth-shaking cry, he will roar in the jungle of wise sages as he sets the wheel of Dhamma in motion. On hearing this, Asita quickly turned away and came down, and went straight to the palace of King Suddhodana. There he stood and called out to the Sakyan warriors, Where is the young prince? I very much want to see him. The Sakyans then swiftly brought him the young prince, whose polished skin shone brilliantly like gold in a crucible, splendid in its purity and glory of perfect color. On seeing the prince shining with the iridescence of a peacock, pure as the full moon shines in the darkness of night, blazing through the clouds like the resplendent sun that is released from the clouds after the rains, suddenly his palpitating heart became pleased, now full of unimaginable joy. Meanwhile, the Devas were holding up parasols above the child, umbrellas of various spurs and bows, with thousand-fold rims, were held up in the air. There were golden-handled yak-tail whisks moving about gently in the air, protecting the young prince. Yet those holding the whisks and parasols were not to be seen. Then the sage, who is also known as the matted-hair Kanhasiri, on witnessing the little child shining bright like a pure gold nugget on a maroon-colored blanket, with a white parasol kept over his head, reached out with his worshipfully adoring fingers, and received him into his arms and into his gladdened heart. Having accepted the small child, and holding with his own hands the giant of all Sakyans, then the Grand Master of the Vedas himself, the fervent seeker of truth, the expert in identifying the marks of the great man, quickly and inquisitively began looking for those excellent marks on the child, until, abruptly, he lifted his tearful gaze, and with a joyful cry declared, No one is superior to you. You who, among all beings two-footed, are there incomparably supreme. This Asita did as he worshipped the young prince with utter respect and devoted reverence. But then, realizing that he would soon be leaving his aged physical body, the sage suddenly became quiet, and sorrowful tears began rolling down his face. On seeing him cry without saying a word, the Sakyans began asking, Master, is there any danger or threat you see befalling our prince? Noticing the worried Sakyans, the sage quickly remarked, No, householders, I do not see any danger befalling the prince. There will be no threats or terrors for him in the future either, not in the slightest. So please, do not fret or worry, for he is the supreme among all living beings. The prince will attain the highest awakening, and with the noble purity he will realize in his heart, he will set the wheel of the Dhamma in motion yet again, out of his great compassion for the well-being and happiness for all beings everywhere. He will be known far and wide, for under him the holy life will be truly and successfully lived. But I cry these tears because I know that very little of my life span is now left. I cry these tears because I will not live long enough to witness him teach the sweet Dhamma, which my heart so desperately longs to hear. Thus, being troubled with sadness and overwhelmed with grief, my heart hurts due to its disarray and misery in being unable to attend to the words spoken by the Peerless One, for I will be long gone by then. Having brought much joy and delight to the Sakyans, the sage left the royal palace and walked straight to his sister's home, where with much compassion for his nephew he instilled a sense of urgency in his heart, encouraging him to begin training in the holy life in preparation for the sweet Dhamma to be available one day by the peerless leader of men. Pay especial heed, for when you hear the words Buddha or a fully self-awakened one has now appeared in the world, who having revealed the true Dhamma is now teaching it to the world, then immediately leave everything and rush towards that peerless teacher and beg him to teach you the Dhamma. And as he teaches you, follow him with all your heart, with the utmost trust and confidence. That way, as you go forth under the Blessed One, surely you will attain the highest goal of the holy life. Then, having been advised out of compassion and with such loving care by his uncle, the sage, who realized with absolute certainty the purity of the highest awakening that will be available for all in the future, Nālaka, the nephew, made the utmost use of his accumulated merits from lives past, as he began purifying himself, training diligently in the restraint of his sense faculties, patiently waiting for the news of the appearance of the Buddha, who would finally set the wheel of Dhamma in motion. And when he heard the sound that the conqueror of the three worlds had set the noble wheel of Dhamma in motion, he quickly rushed to see the Peerless One, the leader of all sages. There his heart suddenly became gladdened with joy, knowing full well that the prediction of his uncle Asita the sage had now come true. And as advised by his kin, the wise old sage, years earlier, Nālaka addressed the Blessed One in verse. I now see the validity of the words I once heard uttered directly from the lips of Asita, for they have been realized. Therefore, I have come to ask you a question, O Gautama, who has gone beyond all things. Having gone from home life into homelessness, being supported by the alms food I collect by wandering, please tell me, O sage, what is the path of wisdom one must train in to reach the highest moral perfection of the holy life? And the Blessed One said, I shall instruct you on the path of wisdom one must train in to reach the highest moral perfection of the holy life, the path of practice that demands fervent perseverance, for it is so hard to develop and difficult to endure. But do not fret. Come, and I will teach you. You must stay strong and unrelenting. You need to cultivate equanimity when you walk into the village, for you will come across those who revile you, while others may offer you praise and respect. Whatever the case may be, you must protect the mind from thoughts of aggression and resentment, as you move about appeased and in peace, without arrogance or conceit. With things being unpredictable, the mind may experience many highs and lows, much like flames in a forest fire. When women trying to seduce sages attempt their charms on you, do not let yourself be seduced by them. Reject completely any kind of sexual behavior, giving up all types of sensual stimulation, whether for this or any other world. Do not hold any aversive or hostile attitude, nor passionate devotion towards things, be they living or not. Just as I am, so are they. Just as they are, so am I. By considering the importance of others and treating them the way you yourself would like to be treated, you should neither kill nor instigate others to kill. By abandoning both longing and greed for the things that ordinary beings are attached to and soiled by, the person with clear vision will continue, undeterred in his path of practice that takes him across and over the realms of hell. Being satisfied with an empty stomach, while being moderate in consuming food, living with few desires, one is no more covetous. Free of desires, remaining hungerless towards experiences, one becomes fully quenched by putting out the fire. Having gone for the daily alms round, on his return, he retires into a secluded grove or at the end of the forest. Sitting at the root of a tree, the sage should prepare a seat for himself and sit. In this way, the one steadying the mind attains to jhana and enjoys being there in seclusion within the forest. Meditating thus, while seated at the root of a tree, one is filled with delight. Later, when the last watch of the night has passed, one carries oneself quietly back to the village, but he does so not with excitement, neither seeking companionship, nor taking pleasure in wandering for food, nor rejoicing when offered a meal by householders. And when having arrived at the village, the sage does not rush inconsiderably to families in quest for alms food. He is mindfully present, without engaging in conversations. He would not utter a single word, for he does not have any ulterior motives other than to simply be there to quietly collect his sustenance of food and then just leave. I received something today. That's good. I didn't receive anything. That's all right, too. In either case, it is the same for him, for he will end up only going back to the very same tree again, to sit at its roots. Wandering with bowl in hand, to those with wrong view looking upon him, he may be seen as lazy or dumb, but he would be neither. He is neither disdainful towards small gifts, nor looking down or scornful of the ones offering small gifts. Path of practice is explained in different ways by the versatile sage, so to fit the capacity of the listener, to help them reach the goal. One does not cross the flood twice, for once having attained, none can fall back from the true freedom attained. For the bhikkhu who has cut across the stream, there can be no more clinging, since there is no more any need for things to be done, or for things to be abandoned, because both are redundant, now that he has left them all behind. Thus he suffers no more. I shall instruct you on the path of wisdom one must train in to reach the highest moral perfection of the holy life. The path of practice requires you to become one who has the simile of the razor blade in mind. So every time you put a morsel of food in your mouth, practice as if you are licking a razor blade that is smeared with honey. Neither have a contracted or sluggish mind, nor allow the mind to become restless or be lost in activity. Maintain purity of the heart, always making sure you are unattached to whatever is taking place, and just keep your focus on living the holy life all the way to its completion. Keep training yourself in this path of practice, while appreciating the role of seclusion, without losing consideration and care for the other dedicated practitioners on the path. Do not forget, the path of wisdom is ultimately a personal path, it is said. But do not fret, for once you learn to enjoy fully the seclusion it brings, your light will beam throughout all the 10 directions. Once having received the teaching from the wise, meditators seek out seclusion, giving up sensual stimulation as they become collected. It is in this manner that my students train, dedicating themselves every day to the fervent development of their faith and wise moral shame. You must learn this by looking at how water flows through holes, fissures, and crevices as it forms into rivers. Then you will understand the difference between shallow streams or creeks, where water flows with such boisterous noise, whereas in the great rivers and oceans it flows undetected, silently. Remember, that which is empty makes a lot of noise, while the ones that are complete remain silent and at peace. The fool is like a half-full pot, but the wise are as deep lakes, filled to the brim. When the recluse speaks much, uttering words full of meaning and depth, it is because he must teach the Dhamma to those eager to listen, the Dhamma that he himself has personally come to know, realizing it directly. And when the one who has come to understand the Dhamma with its depth of meaning no longer has much left to say, he remains quiet, for he is the sage who has completed his training in the path of wisdom, and has now reached the highest moral perfection of the holy life. Thus, he has become a sage. Sutta Nipāta 3.12 Dvayatānupassanā Sutta. Contemplations on the Dyad. I have personally heard this. On one full moon night, on the 15th day of the month, when the Blessed One was living in Savathi's Pubbā monastery, in the palace of Megara's mother, the Blessed One was seated in the open air, attended by the Sangha of bhikkhus. Then, as the Blessed One observed the Sangha of bhikkhus, sitting ever so silently around him, he began addressing them by saying, Bhikkhus, if there are any persons who question you about the justifiable reason or purpose for listening to the Dhamma, those instrumentally skillful mental states that are noble, which effectively lead one to full awakening, then you should reply to them in this manner. It is for the exact purpose of knowing and truly understanding as it really is, the dyad or the two-aspect nature of this Dhamma. And what would this two-aspect nature or dyad be referring to here? This is suffering. This is the arising and origin of suffering. This is one mode of contemplation. This is the cessation of suffering. This is the path of practice that leads to the cessation of suffering, and this happens to be the second mode of contemplation. Now, bhikkhus, when a bhikkhu who engages in the practice thus, living with persevering effort, diligent and driven, correctly and consistently contemplating and reflecting on these dualities, one of two results may be expected for him. Either full awakening in this very life, or if there is any kind of clinging left in him, or the desire to seize and grab onto anything, then the attainment of the fruit of non-returning, anagami phala. This is what was spoken by the Blessed One. And then the Blessed One addressed the bhikkhus further, in verse. Those who do not know nor are able to see suffering for what it is, its cause for arising, and therefore its origin, how all that suffering could in fact be entirely destroyed without any remainder, and the path of practice that leads one to the end of all suffering, then it is impossible for them to experience the release of the heart, impossible for them to become liberated through wisdom, due to the absence of proper understanding of how things come to be. As a result, it is impossible that they could one day put an end to suffering, for they will continue to be reborn, ceaselessly going through birth, aging, and death. But those who do know and are able to see suffering for what it is, its cause for arising, and therefore its origin, how all that suffering could in fact be entirely destroyed without any remainder, and the path of practice that leads one to the end of all suffering, then they will indeed experience the release of the heart and be liberated through wisdom, by properly understanding how things come to be. As a result, they will put an end to suffering, and finally free themselves from rebirth, aging, and death. And if, bhikkhus, some might question you further by asking, could there be another mode of contemplating the Dyad correctly? Then you should reply to them by saying, yes, there could be. And how is that? Whatever suffering that originates, all that is due to having assets or acquisitions. This is one mode of contemplation. But with the utter fading away and cessation of all assets or acquisitions, there can be no more origination of suffering. This is the second mode of contemplation. Now, bhikkhus, when a bhikkhu who engages in the practice thus, living with persevering effort, diligent and driven, correctly and consistently contemplating and reflecting on these dualities, one of two results may be expected for him. Either full awakening in this very life, or if there is any kind of clinging left in him, or the desire to seize or grab onto anything, then the attainment of the fruit of non-returning. This is what was spoken by the Blessed One. And then the Blessed One addressed the bhikkhus further in verse. Behind the countless phenomena offered by the world, all suffering arises on account of assets or acquisitions, leading to rebirth. But the fool continues on making and adding more assets or acquisitions, and as a result, that imbecile goes through suffering again and again. Therefore, by clearly knowing and understanding the true cause for rebirth and the arising of further suffering, one should just give up making or adding more assets or acquisitions entirely. And if, bhikkhus, you were to be asked, could there be another mode of contemplating the Dyad correctly? Then you should reply to them by saying, yes, there could be. And how is that? Whatever suffering that originates, all that is due to ignorance. This is one mode of contemplation. But with the utter fading away and cessation of ignorance, there can be no more origination of suffering. This is the second mode of contemplation. Now, bhikkhus, when a bhikkhu who engages in the practice thus, living with persevering effort, diligent and driven, correctly and consistently contemplating and reflecting on these dualities, one of two results may be expected for him. Either full awakening in this very life, or if there is any kind of clinging left in him, or the desire to seize or grab onto anything, then the attainment of the fruit of non-returning. This is what was spoken by the Blessed One. And then the Blessed One continued addressing the bhikkhus further in verse. Those who keep loitering in this samsara, moving incessantly through the cycles of birth and death, again and again, from a state of thisness to an otherwiseness, they find themselves inevitably trapped in an endless journey, which is merely a perpetuation of ignorance. Ignorance is the great delusion, due to which one has wandered long in this samsara. But those beings who are endowed with knowledge and understanding put a final end to this process of coming back again and again into repeated existences. And if, bhikkhus, you were to be asked, could there be another mode of contemplating the Dyad correctly? Then you should reply to them by saying, yes, there could be. And how is that? Whatever suffering that originates, all that is due to the habitual drives, sankhara. This is one mode of contemplation. But with the utter fading away and cessation of habitual drives, sankhara, there can be no more origination of suffering. This is the second mode of contemplation. Now, bhikkhus, when a bhikkhu who engages in the practice thus, living with persevering effort, diligent and driven, correctly and consistently contemplating and reflecting on these dualities, one of two results may be expected for him. Either full awakening in this very life, or, if there is any kind of clinging left in him, or the desire to seize or grab onto anything, then the attainment of the fruit of non-returning. This is what was spoken by the Blessed One. And then the Blessed One continued addressing the bhikkhus further in verse. Whatever suffering that arises or is experienced springs from habitual drives, sankhara. But with the cessation of habitual drives, there is no more arising of suffering. Suffering springs forth from habitual drives. By knowing the danger in this and thus understanding its significance, quickly put an end to suffering. By the stilling of all acquisitions or assets that you hold dear, in addition to putting a stop to ceaseless perceptions. This, in essence, is the very destruction of suffering that one should come to know as it truly is. Seeing correctly in this manner, the wise practitioners of the path slip through the tight yoke of Mara by attaining to right and perfect understanding, and thus fully transcend rebirth and death. And if, bhikkhus, you were to be asked, could there be another mode of contemplating the Dyad correctly? Then you should reply to them by saying, yes, there could be. And how is that? Whatever suffering that originates, all that is due to consciousness, vijnana. This is one mode of contemplation. But with the utter fading away and cessation of consciousness, there can be no more origination of suffering. This is the second mode of contemplation. Now, bhikkhus, when a bhikkhu who engages in the practice thus, living with persevering effort, diligent and driven, correctly and consistently contemplating and reflecting on these dualities, one of two results may be expected for him. Either full awakening in this very life, or, if there is any kind of clinging left in him, or the desire to seize or grab onto anything, then the attainment of the fruit of non-returning. This is what was spoken by the Blessed One. And then the Blessed One continued addressing the bhikkhus further in verse. Whatever suffering that arises or is experienced springs from consciousness, vijnana. But with the cessation of consciousness, there is no more arising of suffering. Suffering springs forth from consciousness. By knowing the danger in this and understanding its significance, the bhikkhu, who quickly puts an end to suffering through the stilling and appeasement of all consciousnesses, thus becomes hungerless and forever cooled. And if, bhikkhus, you were to be asked, could there be another mode of contemplating the dyad correctly? Then you should reply to them by saying, yes, there could be. And how is that? Whatever suffering that originates, all that is due to contact. This is one mode of contemplation. But with the utter fading away and cessation of contact, there can be no more origination of suffering. This is the second mode of contemplation. Now, bhikkhus, when a bhikkhu who engages in the practice thus, living with persevering effort, diligent and driven, correctly and consistently contemplating, and reflecting on these dualities, one of two results may be expected for him. Either full awakening in this very life, or if there is any kind of clinging left in him, or the desire to seize or grab onto anything, then the attainment of the fruit of non-returning. This is what was spoken by the Blessed One. And then the Blessed One continued, addressing the bhikkhus further, in verse. Those who, being overcome by contact, are swept up and dragged into the endless currents of becoming, who continue practicing the wrong path, are far removed from ever destroying the fetters. But those who, understanding the truth about contact, choose to forsake it and simply walk away from it, they delight in the peace that follows whenever contact is abandoned. In this way, they are the ones who, by thoroughly knowing contact, become hungerless and forever cooled. And if, bhikkhus, you were to be asked, could there be another mode of contemplating the dyad correctly? Then you should reply to them by saying, yes, there could be. And how is that? Whatever suffering that originates, all that is due to feeling. This is one mode of contemplation. But with the utter fading away and cessation of feeling, there can be no more origination of suffering. This is the second mode of contemplation. Now, bhikkhus, when a bhikkhu who engages in the practice thus, living with persevering effort, diligent and driven, correctly and consistently contemplating, and reflecting on these dualities, one of two results may be expected for him. Either full awakening in this very life, or if there is any kind of clinging left in him, or the desire to seize or grab onto anything, then the attainment of the fruit of non-returning. This is what was spoken by the Blessed One. And then the Blessed One continued, addressing the bhikkhus further in verse. While experiencing feelings, whether internally or externally, whatever that is felt, be it pleasant, painful, or even neutral, one knows and understands all of it to be, in essence, just suffering, through and through. How they are all a scam, cunningly deceptive and utterly breakable things that keep falling apart. Thus, while observing touch after touch at every sense contact, there arises disenchantment. By understanding the truth about feeling and thus seeing them fade away and disintegrate, then and there the bhikkhu grows even more dispassionate and thereby destroys feelings altogether, becoming hungerless and forever cooled. And if, bhikkhus, you were to be asked, could there be another mode of contemplating the dyad correctly? Then you should reply to them by saying, yes, there could be. And how is that? Whatever suffering that originates, all that is due to craving. This is one mode of contemplation. But with the utter fading away and cessation of craving, there can be no more origination of suffering. This is the second mode of contemplation. Now, bhikkhus, when a bhikkhu who engages in the practice thus, living with persevering effort, diligent and driven, correctly and consistently contemplating, and reflecting on these dualities, one of two results may be expected for him. Either full awakening in this very life, or if there is any kind of clinging left in him, or the desire to seize or grab onto anything than the attainment of the fruit of non-returning. This is what was spoken by the Blessed One. And then the Blessed One continued, addressing the bhikkhus further in verse. The man who has craving as his intimate companion and partner, as he continues going through the rounds of rebirth for a long time, cannot transcend this samsara. Now born here, then born there, from a state of thisness to one of otherwiseness. As a result, he will never escape this endless journey of suffering. But seeing the evils of craving that generates so much misery, let the bhikkhu conduct himself mindfully, with craving fully relinquished and seizing totally abandoned. And if, bhikkhus, you were to be asked, could there be another mode of contemplating the Dyad correctly? Then you should reply to them by saying, yes, there could be. And how is that? Whatever suffering that originates, all that is due to grabbing. This is one mode of contemplation. But with the utter fading away and cessation of grabbing, there can be no more origination of suffering. This is the second mode of contemplation. Now, bhikkhus, when a bhikkhu who engages in the practice thus, living with persevering effort, diligent and driven, correctly and consistently contemplating, and reflecting on these dualities, one of two results may be expected for him. Either full awakening in this very life, or, if there is any kind of clinging left in him, or the desire to seize or grab onto anything, then the attainment of the fruit of non-returning. This is what was spoken by the Blessed One. And then the Blessed One continued addressing the bhikkhus further in verse. Continued existence depends on grabbing and seizing. That which is born inevitably experiences suffering. Death comes to all those who are born. This is the very origin of suffering. Therefore, through the destruction of grabbing and seizing, the well-informed wise men, by their direct realization of the extinction of rebirth, no longer go to future becoming. And if, bhikkhus, you were to be asked, could there be another mode of contemplating the Dyad correctly? Then you should reply to them by saying, yes, there could be. And how is that? Whatever suffering that originates, all that is due to training in the wrong path. This is one mode of contemplation. But with the utter fading away and cessation of training in the wrong path, there can be no more origination of suffering. This is the second mode of contemplation. Now, bhikkhus, when a bhikkhu who engages in the practice thus, living with persevering effort, diligent and driven, correctly and consistently contemplating and reflecting on these dualities, one of two results may be expected for him. Either full awakening in this very life, or, if there is any kind of clinging left in him or the desire to seize or grab onto anything, then the attainment of the fruit of non-returning. This is what was spoken by the Blessed One. And then the Blessed One continued addressing the bhikkhus further in verse. Whatever suffering that arises or is experienced springs from training in the wrong path. But with the cessation of training in the wrong path, there is no more arising of suffering. Suffering springs forth from training in the wrong path. By knowing the danger in this and understanding its significance, one gives up training in the wrong path, becoming liberated from the pain of uncertainty. The bhikkhu, through his calm and appeased heart, cuts himself free from the desire for continued re-becoming, as he, right then and there, ends his journey, loitering around in samsara. And if, bhikkhus, you were to be asked, could there be another mode of contemplating the Dyad correctly? Then you should reply to them by saying, yes, there could be. And how is that? Whatever suffering that originates, all that is due to nourishment. This is one mode of contemplation. But with the utter fading away and cessation of nourishment, there can be no more origination of suffering. This is the second mode of contemplation. Now, bhikkhus, when a bhikkhu who engages in the practice thus, living with persevering effort, diligent and driven, correctly and consistently contemplating and reflecting on these dualities, one of two results may be expected for him. Either full awakening in this very life, or if there is any kind of clinging left in him, or the desire to seize or grab onto anything, then the attainment of the fruit of non-returning. This is what was spoken by the Blessed One. And then the Blessed One continued, addressing the bhikkhus further in verse. Whatever suffering arises, all that is dependent on nourishment. With the cessation of that nourishment, there is no more arising of suffering. By knowing the danger in this and understanding how suffering relies on the constant supply of nourishment, ahara, one becomes liberated, due to no more relying or dependence on nourishment. Having eliminated the heart's contaminants, and properly understanding the role of maintaining one's health while avoiding getting sick, the Arahant, who has now gained the threefold higher knowledges, is firmly established in the Dhamma and cannot be enclosed within any outline. And if, bhikkhus, you were to be asked, could there be another mode of contemplating the Dyad correctly? Then you should reply to them by saying, yes, there could be. And how is that? Whatever suffering that originates, all that is due to agitation. This is one mode of contemplation. But with the utter fading away and cessation of agitation, there can be no more origination of suffering. This is the second mode of contemplation. Now, bhikkhus, when a bhikkhu who engages in the practice thus, living with persevering effort, diligent and driven, correctly and consistently contemplating and reflecting on these dualities, one of two results may be expected for him. Either full awakening in this very life, or if there is any kind of clinging left in him, or the desire to seize or grab onto anything, then the attainment of the fruit of non-returning. This is what was spoken by the Blessed One. And then the Blessed One continued addressing the bhikkhus further in verse. Whatever suffering arises, all that is dependent on agitation. With the cessation of agitation, there is neither the cause nor the experiencing of suffering. By knowing the danger in this, and understanding how suffering results from the presence of agitation, one stops paying attention to disturbing thoughts and ideations, and thereby removing the very conditions for the habitual drives to take over one's heart. In this manner, the mindful bhikkhu lives contentedly, with an imperturbable mind, unshakable and free from grabbing or seizing. And if, bhikkhus, you were to be asked, could there be another mode of contemplating the Dyad correctly? Then you should reply to them by saying, yes, there could be. And how is that? For someone who remains dependent, there is distress. This is one mode of contemplation. But for the one who is no longer dependent, there can be no distress. This is the second mode of contemplation. Now, bhikkhus, when a bhikkhu who engages in the practice thus, living with persevering effort, diligent and driven, correctly and consistently contemplating and reflecting on these dualities, one of two results may be expected for him. Either full awakening in this very life, or if there is any kind of clinging left in him, or the desire to seize or grab onto anything, then the attainment of the fruit of non-returning. This is what was spoken by the Blessed One. And then the Blessed One continued addressing the bhikkhus further in verse. For the one who lives independent, there is no distress, but the one dependent on things, while still grabbing onto thisness and otherwiseness, moving from one rebirth here to the next one over there, as a result, he will never escape this endless journey of suffering. By understanding the danger in this, and seeing the great fear of having dependencies, the mindful bhikkhu pushes forth courageously, independent and free from the tendency to grab onto this or that, as he lives contentedly. And if, bhikkhus, you were to be asked, could there be another mode of contemplating the Dyad correctly? Then you should reply to them by saying, yes, there could be. And how is that? Formless realms are a far better option to be reborn in, as they are more peaceful and sublime than any of the realms of form. This is one mode of contemplation. Cessation and putting an end to all things, now that is a far better option than any experience to be gained in the formless realms. This is the second mode of contemplation. Now, bhikkhus, when a bhikkhu who engages in the practice thus, living with persevering effort, diligent and driven, correctly and consistently contemplating and reflecting on these dualities, one of two results may be expected for him. Either full awakening in this very life, or, if there is any kind of clinging left in him, or the desire to seize or grab onto anything, then the attainment of the fruit of non-returning. This is what was spoken by the Blessed One. And then the Blessed One continued addressing the bhikkhus further in verse. Whatever beings found within the realms of form, and those who are settled in the formless realms, by not understanding the fact of cessation and not knowing when to stop, they continue to re-experience the sorrows of birth and death, coming back again and again. But those who, having comprehended fully the truth about the realms of form, do not settle for the formless realms either. Instead, they cut themselves free by putting an end to both, finding release in cessation. Thus, they leave behind death altogether, becoming its conquerors. And if, bhikkhus, you were to be asked, could there be another mode of contemplating the Dyad correctly? Then you should reply to them by saying, yes, there could be. And how is that? Bhikkhus, whatever that has been pondered over as this is indeed true by the world with its gods, Māghas and Brahmas, with its recluses and Brahmins, all that has been clearly seen by the noble ones as it truly is, with right wisdom as that is indeed false. This is one mode of contemplation. Further, bhikkhus, whatever that has been pondered over as this is indeed false and untrue by the world with its gods, Māghas and Brahmas, with its recluses and Brahmins, all that has been clearly seen by the noble ones as it truly is, with right wisdom as that is indeed true. This is the second mode of contemplation. Now, bhikkhus, when a bhikkhu who engages in the practice thus, living with persevering effort, diligent and driven, correctly and consistently contemplating and reflecting on these dualities, one of two results may be expected for him. Either full awakening in this very life, or, if there is any kind of clinging left in him, or the desire to seize or grab onto anything, then the attainment of the fruit of non-returning. This is what was spoken by the Blessed One. And then the Blessed One continued addressing the bhikkhus further in verse. Behold the world with all its gods, imagining there to be a substantially independent self in each, atta, where none exists, being entrenched in name and form, namarupa, keeps adding upon the illusion the wrong view. Ah, this is the truth. In whatever way one imagines or fancies a thing, therein it turns out to be otherwise. And that itself is the falsity, the very lie inherent in it. For whatever is momentary is by nature also falsifying the puny thing. But Nibbana is unfalsifying indeed, and the noble ones know this to be the undeniable truth. Thus, through their understanding and direct comprehension of it, they are hungerless and forever cooled. And if, bhikkhus, you were to be asked, could there be another mode of contemplating the Dyad correctly? Then you should reply to them by saying, yes, there could be. And how is that? Bhikkhus, whatever that has been regarded as happiness by the world, with its gods, Maras, and Brahmas, with its recluses and Brahmins, all that has been clearly seen by the noble ones, just as it truly is, with right wisdom, as being in fact suffering. This is one mode of contemplation. Further, bhikkhus, whatever that has been regarded as suffering by the world, with its gods, Maras, and Brahmas, with its recluses and Brahmins, all that has been clearly seen by the noble ones, just as it truly is, with right wisdom, as being, in fact, happiness. This is the second mode of contemplation. Now, bhikkhus, when a bhikkhu who engages in the practice thus, living with persevering effort, diligent and driven, correctly and consistently contemplating and reflecting on these dualities, one of two results may be expected for him. Either full awakening in this very life, or if there is any kind of clinging left in him, or the desire to seize or grab onto anything, then the attainment of the fruit of non-returning. This is what was spoken by the Blessed One. And then the Blessed One continued addressing the bhikkhus further in verse. All forms, sounds, odors, tastes, touches, ideas, and mental phenomena, all that they deem to be desirable, charming, or pleasing things, will continue to exist for them, so long as they acknowledge and claim them to be as such. The world with its devas agrees, as they all declare, that whatever gives them the feeling of pleasure is to be recognized as happiness. Meanwhile, wherever there is the absence of pleasure and more of the painful, that they also agree in declaring as suffering. But the noble ones have declared as bliss the moment one puts an end to the continued substantiation of an independent selfhood and the delusion of I-making. Behold, in contrast of their vision with that of the entire world. Meanwhile, it is the breaking up of the illusion of a substantial self that is seen as happiness by the noble ones. But this goes completely opposite to what the whole world sees and accepts. What others call pleasurable, the noble ones declare to be, in fact, painful. What others call painful, the noble ones know and declare to be, in fact, happiness. So you see, this Dhamma is very difficult to understand for the majority. Hence, it remains confusing to ignorant people. It is pitch black for those shrouded by ignorance, and with darkness all around them they fail to see. But for the good, with their hearts kept wide open, it is as bright as day. Hence, they clearly see. However, There are those who, although standing so close, remain shrouded, just like beasts, not able to see nor understand the Dhamma even when it's right in front of their eyes. They are the ones who continue to be carried and swept away by the current, overcome with the passion to become, to re-experience. They remain in Mara's tight grip. No wonder they find it difficult to realize this beautiful Dhamma. Who else, other than the noble ones, could truly value full awakening? After all, they are the ones who, having known it personally and directly, are now fully released with the destruction of the heart's contaminants, having attained Nibbana Supreme. This is what the Blessed One said, and those bhikkhus listened with delighted hearts to the words spoken by the Blessed One. And while the Blessed One was giving this discourse, the hearts of 60 bhikkhus were fully released from the asavas, abandoning as they did the contaminants in their hearts, with nothing left for them to grab or seize.